Chapter 25:06. Burial shrieked at Bernie's words. "Uncle, how powerful is your criminal police force? Can't you fight her alone?" Burial was in disbelief. Bernie sighed, shook his head, and didn't say anything else. The director of the International Intelligence Platform walked into the villa. "Old Bernie, how's it going?" the director asked worriedly. "There's no news about her at the moment. Both inside and outside of my villa, even the blind spots nearby are filled with surveillance cameras. Unless Slaying God came down from the sky, no matter how capable she is, she'll definitely be discovered by my men before she enters the living room." Bernie was very confident about that. On the roof of Bernie's villa, a petite silhouette hopped down from a height of a few thousand meters in a helicopter. The petite silhouette grasped the wind speed, humidity, and any other factors and conditions that would affect the accuracy of her landing. Within 5 seconds of landing, he opened his parachute and landed on the roof of Bernie's villa with a precise position. After landing on the roof, Yunjian kept her parachute as fast as she could. She moved soundlessly and stuck herself to the wall of the villa. There was only one SWAT officer patrolling under the villa's roof. When Yunjian landed earlier, she had timed it perfectly. The moment she landed and stuck herself to the wall, the SWAT officer happened to walk to the side. Yunjian's figure that flashed past was the SWAT officer's blind spot. As expected, Bernie was not a simple person. It was almost unheard of for someone to sneak in from the sky. However, for safety's sake, Bernie still sent a SWAT officer to patrol the villa's roof. Yunjian stuck close to the wall and followed the SWAT officer around the cover. Just when the SWAT officer walked to a spot where the SWAT officers patrolling under the villa could not see, Yunjian silently rolled toward the SWAT officer. She placed her hand on his head swiftly, like an eagle's claw, while her other hand covered his mouth from behind. Within a second, Yunjian's hand slid from the top of his head to his neck and snapped his neck. Dragging him to a dark place, Yunjian leaned against the corner of the wall to hear the sound from the stairs. After confirming that there was no one around, Yunjian held onto the wall with one hand and hung her body in the air by the window under the eaves. Her other hand unlocked the window at lightning speed and flipped through the window. Yunjian's action just now would have been discovered by the special police patrolling below if they had heard the rustling of leaves in the wind. However, at this moment, no one heard a sound. In the living room of the villa, Bernie is still standing here. Suddenly, the police officer's voice was heard from outside the house. "It's Slaying God. Slaying God was here. Slaying God has been found." Hearing this, Bernie turned around and told the 6 shareholders, "Stay here and don't move." He held his pistol and rushed out of his villa as fast as he could. "Captain, it wasn't Slaying God. Go back quickly. We've fallen into a trap." Just as he rushed to the scene where the voice came from, the shouting SWAT officer was holding a butterfly knife in his hand as he screamed, with his eyes wide open. Bernie roared and ran back to the living room as fast as he could. He saw his niece Burial and the director of the International Intelligence Platform Center lying on the ground, paralyzed and trembling in fear. The 6 targets of Slaying God, the 6 shareholders of the International Intelligence Platform Center, were lying in a pool of blood. Their eyes were wide open as they died, with everlasting regret. There was a piece of white paper with words written on it on the wooden table. The paper was pinned to the table by a dagger. Bernie's heart skipped a beat. He walked forward quickly and saw the words written in red ink on the white paper. The words were written in a carefree manner, but they gave off a sense of terror. "Target killed. Handwritten by Slaying God. M." Chapter 25:07. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. He had heard of Slaying God's method of completing missions and that ordinary people could not even see her shadow. Initially, Bernie thought that he would be able to face Slaying God head-on after so much planning. Even if he could not defeat her, he would at least be able to hold her back for 10 minutes. What Bernie did not expect was that he would be utterly defeated by Slaying God. Forget 10 minutes, it was not even a second. He could not even see slaying God's shadow. When his underling shouted, "Slaying God is here," Bernie did not even have the time to check before dashing out. Moreover, unless slaying God had really descended from the sky. Otherwise, no matter how powerful she was, she could only attack from outside the door. That was also the reason why Bernie, the captain of the International Police Force, fell for her trick. Not only was slaying God powerful, but she also knew how to read people's minds. From the moment she created the illusion that she had snuck in from outside, she had already guessed that Bernie would definitely dash out of the house based on his personality. "Did you see slaying God just now?" Bernie raised his voice and looked at his niece Beryl and the director, who were huddled on the ground in fear. "And no, I didn't see them. Uncle and the rest died suddenly. It was just a blink of an eye. When I opened my eyes, they were dead. They were dead." Sob. Beryl hugged her body tightly in fear as she shuddered. There was a hint of sobbing in her voice. She was so frightened that she had lost all feeling in her body. "What about this flying dagger? Where did it come from?" Belle asked before Beryl could finish her sobbing. I saw it. The staircase. It came from upstairs." The director pointed at the top of the stairs with a trembling finger. Using all the strength he had left in his life, he uttered the words that scared him out of his wits. "The staircase. Upstairs in the sky. She came from the sky." Bernie was suddenly enlightened. He held his pistol and rushed out of the villa, only to see the girl in the sky holding the rope hanging from the helicopter with one hand. He couldn't see her face clearly because she was wearing a pair of sunglasses. Grabbing the rope that hung down from the helicopter with one hand, Yunjian, who was hoisted higher, was not at all afraid. With a touch of her red lips, she flashed a taunting grin at Bernie. In the next second, he grabbed the rope with his other hand and quickly climbed from the bottom of the rope to the top of the rope. With a simple somersault, the helicopter was already a few hundred meters above the ground. He took advantage of the momentum and somersaulted into the helicopter. His movements were extremely smooth, so relaxed that it was unbelievable that a person could do it. Bernie shuddered violently. She watched as Yunjian left, but there was nothing she could do. The next day, international news agencies of all sizes spread the news. Slaying God, the #1 on the International Secret Agent ranking, had returned. She had returned and killed the 6 shareholders of the International Intelligence Platform Center who had maliciously embezzled the Kosha mercenaries' intelligence team. As soon as the news came out, it instantly replaced the media's reports on the celebrities in the entertainment industry. Everyone turned their attention to this matter. In the next few months, all the companies and enterprises that had embezzled the Kosha mercenaries' foreign cooperation projects returned all the embezzled funds to the Kosha mercenaries. Some companies and enterprises even returned the embezzled funds to the Kosha mercenaries after hearing the news. They even offered hundreds of millions of USD in cash to show their sincerity. Just like the directors of the International Intelligence Platform Center, they took the initiative to apologize. Slaying God's name swept through all the major international news media. Even all the programs that reported on the entertainment industry were taken off the air and switched to Slaying God's program. At this moment, Yunjian, who had caused a global storm, was sitting in a coffee shop in River City's university town. Outside the coffee shop, Mo Buffon and the rest from the martial arts club who had just reported to the university received the news of Yunjian's return. They seemed to have gathered for a gang fight. Under the attention of passers-by, they rushed into the coffee shop and rushed to Yunjian. "President, you're finally back." Top reading website. M. Chapter 25:08. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. It had been 15 or 16 days since the first day of the new year, and since that incident had happened. It was time for the students to return to school. There were more than 10 universities in Jiangqing University City. The university students here generally started school early. Jiangqing City of Zhe Province paid more attention to academics, so the schools started school early. The winter and summer holidays were very late. Of course, this was not a good thing for the students. At that time, Mo Buffon led a group of people into the coffee shop as if they were going to fight. They surrounded Yunjian. Yun Jian held a cup of coffee in her hand and tasted it carefully. She did not turn to look at Mo Bufan and the others. "How was last year's martial arts competition?" she asked casually. Yun Jian had taken a leave of absence a year ago. At that time, the martial arts club was about to hold a martial arts competition. Before leaving, Yun Jian had trained Mo Bufan and the other members of the martial arts club. Of course, it was a complete victory. "President, you don't know, but after our martial arts club won a complete victory last year, we represented all the universities in Jiangqing City and participated in the provincial martial arts competition. We also got into the top 3. If nothing goes wrong, the school will arrange for us to represent your province in the national competition in the next few days. Since you're back, President, you should participate with us." Before Mo Bufan could speak, Zhou Huntao spoke first from Yun Jian. "I won't participate." Yun Jian pursed her red lips. After speaking, Yun Jian handed an invitation to Mo Bufan and the others one by one. Then, she stood up and said to them, "On April 1st, I will hold an engagement party at Hubble Island. There will be a car to pick you up. This is the invitation." This invitation was made recently. Yun Jian had already sent out invitations to many people. The 1st of April was Yun Jian's birthday. It could be translated as CE without the intonation. Perhaps it was fate for her to be with CE. "Yes, President." An engagement party at Hubble Island. Hubble Island was voted as the world's sexiest beach by Country M's Newsweek. Along the beach, there was a luxurious resort consisting of 25 colorful villas. And Hubble Island is most famous for its pink beach. Other beaches are yellow, but Hubble Island's beach is pink. It's made of real pink sand. "This is King romantic," Zhou Huntao said to Yun Jian with admiration. Yun Jian pursed her lips and said to them, "Remember, on the night of March 31st, there will be a special car to take you to Hubble Island." Okay. Even if he forgot to take a dump, he would not miss such a good opportunity. A free vacation on Hubble Island. Haha. Zhou Huntao laughed wretchedly. "All right, wipe your saliva." As an educated young master, Mo Bufan couldn't stand it any longer. He took a tissue and handed it to Zhou Huntao. Hearing this, the rest of the martial arts clubs burst into laughter. It was almost the middle of February, and there was still about a month and a half before the engagement party. Less than a week after Zhou Huntao invited Yun Jian to participate in the national martial arts competition with them, the school sent a notice to Zhou Huntao, Mo Bufan, and the others to pack their luggage overnight and rush to the national martial arts competition. Because they were notified in advance, they were not in a hurry. Although Yun Jian did not participate, she was invited by Mo Bufan and the others to watch the competition. This time, the venue of the competition was in Liao Province. Liao Province was not close to Zhe Province, so they took a train for nearly 20 hours to get there. The winter in Liao Province was much colder than Zhe Province. That was the north, so it was naturally incomparable to the south of Zhe Province. After arriving at the venue of the competition in Liao Province, Mo Bufan and the others planned to familiarize themselves with the competition venue. It's the people from the shrine, hey? Just after Mo Bufan and the others arrived, a group of members who also carried the signboard of the martial arts club walked over from the opposite side and greeted Mo Bufan and the others. This group of people was also from a martial arts club. They were the martial arts club sent by Zhe Province to participate in the National Martial Arts Club. Other than the martial arts club formed by Mo Bufan and his group, who were in the top 3 of the provincial competition, the other martial arts clubs formed by the top 3 of the provincial competition. Shrine was the name that Yun Jian came up with for the club. This group of people was the second-place martial arts club in the provincial competition, the Combat Society. The captain of the Combat Society was a chubby man named Diao Xiaozhan. Diao Xiaozhan's nickname was very interesting. His companions all called him Principal Diao. It could be understood as running around with the principal in his mouth. At that time, Diao Xiaozhan walked over and high-fived Mo Bufan. He glanced around and saw Yun Jian, who had not appeared in the previous competition. He asked Mo Bufan in surprise, "Mo Bufan, is this your little girlfriend?" After Mo Bufan heard this, He quickly shook his head and then said something that shocked Diao Xiaozhan and the others. She's the one I told you about, the strongest president of our martial arts club. Top reading website. Chapter 2509. She's the president of your martial arts club? The one you told us about during the provincial competition last time. The valiant female president who kicked the door of the club that bullied you in order to avenge you? Diao Xiaozhan was stunned after hearing Mo Buffan's words. Then he spoke in a daze. After that, Diao Xiaozhan touched his nose and looked at Yun Jian's thin and weak body with a surprised expression. From your previous description, I thought she was a valiant and burly girl. I didn't expect her to be. Haha, you really can't judge a book by its cover. Come. We're all friends. We haven't gathered for a while since the provincial competition. There's someone selling grilled sausages outside the arena. I'll stop him, and let's have a small meal first. Because we have to gather later, it's not good to run far. Let's go to the restaurant in the evening. I'll treat you guys to a meal. Diao Xiaozhan didn't say much about Yun Jian. He was also a relatively bold fatty. After saying this, he ran out to stop the old lady who was selling grilled sausages. After a while, Diao Xiaozhan ran back with a lot of grilled sausages in his hands. Come. I'll treat you guys. Yun Jian didn't argue and took the grilled sausages. At this time, Diao Xiaozhan and Mo Buffon were talking like old friends. In fact, Diao Xiaozhan and Mo Buffon only met once during the provincial competition last time. However, some people, although they only met once, could be like old friends who had known each other for half their lives. In fact, they were bosom friends, destined to be friends. Hey, it's the Lobster Club from the same province as us. At this time, a girl from the martial arts club saw a group of people walking by not far away and said to everyone, "Hey, you guys are here too." After the girl said this to everyone, she stretched out her hand to greet the people from the Lobster Club. In this martial arts competition, there were only 3 martial arts clubs from each province that were qualified to participate in the national competition. The top 3 of Zhejiang province's provincial competition last time were all here. The group of people walking by not far away was the Lobster Club that ranked first in Zhejiang province's provincial competition last time. They were also the champions of Zhejiang province's provincial competition. Logically speaking, when everyone came out to participate in the national competition and met people from the same province, there would always be a sense of closeness. However, the female president of the Lobster Society took the lead and snorted loudly. Then, she turned her head and walked away. The girl's hand stopped in midair and the air froze. F***CK, how can they bully people like this? How can they? Zhou Huntao was the first to feel displeased. It's okay. The girl quickly stopped Zhou Huntao. This girl's name was Yuan Pingping. She was very honest and friendly. Her looks weren't bad either. Although she wasn't a peerless beauty, she was still pleasing to the eye. The president of the Crayfish Society is called Long Xinyan. I heard that she likes to eat crayfish very much, so she named the society this way. The people in her society don't like to talk to people. Mo Buffon explained to Yun Jian. Yun Jian had never participated in the competition before, so she naturally didn't know anything. Okay. Yun Jian nodded. 10 minutes later, all the martial arts clubs were gathered here. They're here. The judges are here, someone shouted. At this time, a few judges who were dressed very conspicuously entered the venue. The competition wasn't going to be held immediately today, so the judges were here to familiarize themselves. At this time, a few judges entered the venue. When she saw a foreign woman in her 20s, Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. This was none other than the niece of the previous Interpol team's captain, Bernie Beryl. However, Yun Jian wasn't surprised. This was because Bernie's niece was learning martial arts from Z country. Yun Jian had seen a brief introduction of Beryl in Bernie's detailed information. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The moment Beryl entered, Long Xinyan, the president of the Lobster Society, suddenly raised her voice smugly and spoke to her companions in a boastful tone, flaunting her knowledge. Did you see that? That judge is the niece of the Interpol team's captain. My parents even brought me to her house as a guest before. That's why she knew so much. Did you know that during this period of time, there's a huge uproar about slaying God, the #1 on the International Secret Agent ranking, returning to the Secret Agent Circle? The first mission she carried out after returning was related to Beryl. Beryl, that's someone who has seen the true face of the #1 on the International Secret Agent ranking, slaying God. Chapter 25:10. Long Xinyan spoke very loudly as if she was afraid that the martial arts club members standing next to her would not be able to hear her. Long Xinyan's Lobster Society was indeed very powerful. As the top martial arts club in Ja Province's martial arts competition, it was only natural that they were capable. Sister Xinyan, does that mean that you know that judge? He's the judge who saw slaying God's true face. A female member of the Lobster Society looked at Long Xinyan excitedly and asked carefully. Long Xinyan saw that the members of the Shrine and the Combat Society were looking at her not far away. She pursed her lips and said confidently, "Of course." In fact, Long Xinyan had attended a ball held by the Beryl family with her parents a few years ago. She had seen Beryl from afar, just like this time. In reality, she had never had the chance to talk to Beryl. However, this was enough for her to brag in front of her fellow students. Yun Jian heard Long Xinyan's boasting, but at that moment, Yun Jian was sitting in the empty audience seats. She was watching the martial arts clubs who had gathered to listen to the judge and the organizer speak from a distance away. On the day of the national competition, there would be a live broadcast recording. In other words, everyone's every move would be shown in front of the national audience, in front of the television. Therefore, the organizers attached great importance to the National Martial Arts Competition this time. The gathering place was the venue of the National Martial Arts Competition. Long Xinyan had just finished bragging when it was Beryl's turn to speak. She cleared her throat with a haughty expression. She spoke in fluent Chinese, a stark contrast to her frightened appearance the other day. She spoke proudly to the crowd. "Hello, everyone. I'm the judge this time, Beryl Austin. You can call me Beryl. Beryl can speak fluent Chinese. Although there are still some English accents in his pronunciation, it is already very impressive to be able to speak Chinese." After the judges had spoken, the organizer said a few more words and dismissed the crowd. After the crowd dispersed, the judges had already left. Seeing that Beryl had left, Long Xinyan boldly boasted, "I heard that Beryl saw slaying God's true face that day." She wasn't even flustered or afraid when she saw slaying God's true face. Rumor has it that slaying God was shocked when she saw Beryl. The more Long Xinyan spoke, the more excited she became. She saw all the members of the Shrine and the Martial Arts Society staring at her. That feeling made Long Xinyan feel proud. "Sister Xinyan, you know so much. Quickly tell us, what exactly happened at that time?" The members of the Lobster Society were the most agitated. A large group of people quickly surrounded Long Xinyan. It was as if he could see slaying God's appearance that day from Long Xinyan's words. When Long Xinyan saw that the members of the Shrine and the Martial Arts Society were still listening to her, she began to fabricate even more nonsense. Yun Jian ignored her. At that time, Yun Jian received a message from Snake. "Lizard," she told Mo Buffon and the others, "My friend is looking for me. I'm going out for a while." Then, she walked out of the competition venue. Before he walked out of the arena, he bumped into Snake. Lizard, who had just entered.
Snake.
Lizard was looking for her because she wanted her to sign a return agreement with the International Secret Agent Assassin website. At that moment, Long Xinyan happened to catch a glimpse of Yun Jian and Snake. Lizard meeting. She glanced over in confusion. Seeing that Long Xinyan was looking over there, she stopped telling the story that everyone was very interested in. Everyone turned their heads to look. They saw Yun Jian taking a black pen from Snake. Lizard and signing her name under a thick contract in front of everyone, looking at the strokes that Yun Jian left behind when she signed her name. It was extremely similar to the name of the person they were discussing at that moment.
M.
Chapter 25:11. Long Xinyan only glanced at it for a moment before retracting her gaze. Long Xinyan remembered that this girl should be here with the people from the shrine to participate in the competition. She was just an unimportant girl. Long Xinyan did not care about her. Let's go. It's my treat. I'll take you guys to afternoon tea. At that moment, the chubby Diao Xiaozhan waved at his club and Yun Jian's club members and walked out of the competition venue. Soon, he came to Yun Jian's side. Although Long Xinyan did not care about Yun Jian, she was still suspicious of the name in Yun Jian's handwriting on the contract. Especially a young girl like her. Why would she sign a contract? There must be something wrong. When Long Xinyan walked over with her club members, Mo Bufan, Diao Xiaozhan, and the others had just arrived at Yun Jian's side and were about to leave the competition venue. At that moment, Yun Jian had just finished signing the contract and put away her pen.
Snake.
Lizard also took the opportunity to take back the contract. Hey, wait a minute. The thing you just signed is a contract, right? Can I have a look? Long Xinyan was interested and reached out to stop Snake Lizard from taking back the contract. Long Xinyan did not give face to Mo Bufan and Diao Xiaozhan. However, because of this contract, she felt that Yun Jian was different from Mo Bufan and the others. Therefore, she wanted to get closer to Yun Jian. Even if she did not know Yun Jian well, his tone wasn't too bad either.
No.
Unexpectedly, Yun Jian rejected her.
Snake.
Lizard was one step ahead of Long Xinyan. She put away the contract and walked out.
So be it.
Long Xinyan was stunned. Then, she immediately rolled her eyes. At the same time, the corner of her mouth twitched. Long Xinyan's martial arts was indeed recognized as powerful, but she did not know how to behave. Sometimes, she even wrote her feelings on her face like an underage girl. Diao Xiaozhan was not stingy with his treat. He directly brought everyone to a crayfish restaurant and ordered 10 plates of crayfish. One had to know that crayfish was very expensive. One plate might cost 2 days of an ordinary person's salary. From this, it could be seen that Diao Xiaozhan clan was definitely well off. Otherwise, he wouldn't have eaten so much. Come. Everyone, eat quickly. Don't stand on ceremony. Today, I'll treat you all to crayfish. Eat that stupid president of the Crayfish Society. She's so stupid, but she's acting like she's so powerful. Diao Xiaozhan's humorous words made everyone burst into laughter. Yun Jian just pursed her red lips and rested her chin on her hand. Suddenly, her attention was attracted by a baby shop opposite the crayfish restaurant. Next to the signboard of this baby shop, there was a line that said, "Original Draft Design Baby Clothing." Looking through the glass window, the clothes and baby products in the baby shop were all very innovative. Thinking of the two guys at home, Yun Jian stood up and said to everyone, "I'll go take a look." Then she walked out. Just as he reached the entrance, he bumped into Long Xinyan and the others. Long Xinyan liked crayfish the most, which was why she named their martial arts society the Crayfish Society. This crayfish restaurant was the only one nearby that had better decoration and looked cleaner inside and out. Therefore, it wasn't strange to bump into Long Xinyan there. Seeing Yun Jian, Long Xinyan snorted coldly and turned to enter the crayfish restaurant. She found a round table and sat down with the people from her martial arts society. The wall of the crayfish restaurant near the street was made of transparent glass. Therefore, Yun Jian could see the specialty baby shop opposite at a glance. At that time, Long Xinyan sat in front of her seat, feeling depressed. After a while, she raised her head and looked through the glass at Yun Jian, who was crossing the road to cross to the baby shop opposite. Suddenly, from the side, an overweight truck rushed straight towards Yun Jian, as if it had been planning for a long time.
Ah!
A female member of the Crayfish Society also saw it and screamed in shock. With this exclamation, everyone's attention was diverted over. At that time, the overweight truck was less than a meter away from Yun Jian. However, just when everyone present thought that Yun Jian would be like a kite with a broken string and be sent flying by the truck, a scene that made everyone's faces turn pale with fright and unforgettable suddenly appeared. Chapter 25:12. It was an overloaded truck that had suddenly charged toward Yunjian. Without giving Yunjian even a second to react, the truck was already right in front of Yunjian. There weren't many such coincidences in the world. Even if someone were to stand up and say that the truck had lost control and that it wasn't a deliberate attempt at murder, the spectators wouldn't believe it. That was because the truck's deliberate attempt at murder was too obvious. However, when the overloaded truck was only half a meter away from Yunjian, everyone imagined that Yunjian would be flung dozens of meters away and fall heavily to the ground, her head bleeding and her life in danger. Yunjian didn't even turn around to face the truck. As though she had a premonition of what was about to happen, she jumped lightly with one leg and placed her right hand on the truck's hood. Just as the truck was about to hit her, she somersaulted and stood on top of the truck's hood. She was just 0.1 seconds away. Based on the truck's speed, if Yunjian had been 0.1 seconds later, the probability of her being seriously injured would have been increased. Furthermore, with that collision, she would have died without a doubt. However, jumping onto the truck's hood wasn't the end of it. After she somersaulted onto the truck's hood, she reacted within 1 second. Then, she jumped lightly onto the truck's roof. After running for 2 steps, she jumped lightly and landed on the ground from the back of the truck. That series of actions sounded easy, but to actually do it was extremely difficult. The truck was still speeding forward. Jumping onto the truck's hood, jumping onto the roof, running for a few steps until she reached the back of the truck and landed on the ground. This series of actions not only required consideration of the truck's crazy speed, wind speed, resistance, and other factors, but also the possibility of being flung off by such a fast truck. It was apparent that Yunjian was so precise that there was not a single mistake, be it in the way she pinpointed or manipulated the various factors. Moreover, she reacted and completed it within 3 seconds. Yes, 3 seconds. Within 3 seconds, Yunjian completed a series of actions that were almost impossible for ordinary people. He landed steadily on the ground. If it were anyone else, they would have been flung out long ago. Yunjian, Emo Buffon, and the others were so frightened that their faces turned green. With Emo Buffon taking the lead, they stood up and pushed aside the stool, running out of the crayfish restaurant with their long legs. Emo Buffon and the others did not spend much time with Yunjian. However, Emo Buffon and the others treated Yunjian as a true friend. Not only because Yunjian was the president of their martial arts club, but also because she was their friend. They were on the same side. Emo Buffon took large strides. Because he ran too fast, he almost fell. However, he supported himself on the ground and stood up. Ignoring his sprained ankle, he was the first to rush out. Zhou Huntao, Zhou Dun, and other members of Yunjian's martial arts club also rushed out of the crayfish restaurant crazily. They ran to Yunjian and asked if she was injured and if she needed to go to the hospital. They were nervous, scared, and terrified because they treated Yunjian as their best friend. It was a friendship that had nothing to do with love, family, or gender. "I'm fine," Yunjian said calmly. At this time, the members of the Crayfish Club and the Combat Club also rushed out of the Crayfish restaurant and came to Yunjian's side. When they saw Yunjian's extremely calm expression, Long Xinyan, Diao Xuezhan, and the others who were already frightened and terrified of how Yunjian could be so powerful were completely stunned. No one was able to recover from Yunjian's astounding performance for a long time. Chi bang. At this time, the speeding truck suddenly crashed into a building in front of him. The owner of the truck obviously did not get out of the car to call the police. On the contrary, he failed to hit Yunjian. After hitting the building, he quickly reversed the truck, as if he was afraid that Yunjian would find him, and quickly fled. Yunjian was not injured, which meant that the driver did not escape. However, he drove away. What he did just now was undoubtedly a premeditated murder. Diao Xuezhan, Long Xinyan, and the others had yet to react. At this time, they were staring at Yunjian in a daze. They saw Yunjian watching the entire process of the truck escaping. "Oh my god, you just now, how did you?" Long Xinyan was so frightened by Yunjian that she stuttered. Before Long Xinyan could finish her sentence, Yun Jian saw that the truck had left her sight. Everyone thought that she would be frightened by the scene just now, but she was not scared at all. Instead, she reached out her hand and calmly took out her phone in front of everyone. She made a call and said something that made everyone's faces turn extremely pale. Lock onto a truck with license plate Liao B, U3616 on the 1st Street of South Road. I'll give you 1 minute. Before it leaves the 1st Street of South Road, blow it up.
M.
Chapter 25:13. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Fire the cannons and blow it up. These simple words stunned Long Xinyan, Diao Xiaozhan, the other members of the Lobster Society and the Combat Society, as well as Mo Bufan and the others who had already seen Yun Jian's strength. Who did you call? Fire the cannons and blow it up. I admit that the truck I saw earlier seemed to have deliberately rushed over to hit you, but you can't just say things like firing the cannons and blowing it up. Long Xinyan was completely shocked by Yun Jian's shocking actions and her unbelievable words. Now that she was talking to Yun Jian, she was a little incoherent. Yun Jian ignored Long Xinyan. After she finished speaking, she hung up the phone. She left Mo Bufan and the others with the words, "Go back and eat first," then walked to the opposite side of the road. In front of the confused crowd, she walked into the baby shop as if nothing had happened. Everyone present had clearly seen how horrifying that scene was. If she was careless, Yun Jian would have died on the spot. If it were a normal girl, wouldn't she have been scared to the point of crying and howling like a ghost or calling the police? Why, when the call was made, not only was it not a call to the police station, but it also used a commanding tone to order the other party to blow up the big truck just now. She's too arrogant. And who is she calling? Did she just blow it up because she said so? Also, why did she walk to the baby shop? Could it be that she has a child? What a strange person. Long Xinyan let out a series of sighs. She was frightened and bewildered just now. Not only was she shocked by Yun Jian's shocking strength, but she also felt that Yun Jian's words and actions were unreasonable. Where were the cannons? She even fired the cannons. She didn't have a child. Why did she go to the baby shop? Yun Jian must have her reasons for doing this. Let's go back first. Mo Bufan was very obedient as he spoke to the people in his society. Hearing Mo Bufan's words, everyone walked towards the crayfish restaurant. However, just as everyone turned around, Long Xinyan was certain that Yun Jian was just joking. Perhaps Yun Jian was simply delusional. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out from a place a little distance away from where the truck had driven away, as if it was fleeing for its life. That deafening sound shook the ground a few hundred meters away from the scene. When this loud boom sounded out, everyone's eyes suddenly widened. This was especially true for Long Xinyan. Long Xinyan was already certain that Yun Jian was spouting nonsense. What do you mean by locking onto the truck with the license plate number? I'll give you 1 minute to blow it up. That's all bullshit. He probably wanted to show off in front of them. That was what Long Xinyan thought at first. Even the ground shook violently when the explosion of the cannon rang out. Only then did Long Xinyan react. Don't tell me that it's really like what Yun Jian said. An hour later, the relevant personnel had already rushed to the scene. At this time, Long Xinyan and the others had also heard about the scene. For some unknown reason, the truck had almost hit someone. Halfway through its escape, the truck had suddenly exploded. The truck was destroyed, and the people were killed. According to witnesses, the truck had suddenly exploded without any warning. Other than the truck itself and the owner, no one was injured. It was as if the heavens were punishing him for escaping. There were no traces of the truck being tampered with at the scene. When they heard the news, Long Xinyan, Diao Xuezhan, Yuan Pingping, and the others present were so shocked that they slammed the table and stood up. Long Xinyan's eyes widened even more exaggeratedly. She looked at Yun Jian, who had already bought many baby products from the baby shop, in horror. She said in disbelief, "Just now. It wasn't you just now. It was you." Halfway through her sentence, Long Xinyan deflated. She sat back in her seat as if she was paralyzed, her face pale with fright. Didn't Yunjian make a call just now before it exploded? How did it end up? She had a feeling that if she dared to complete her sentence, her ending would not be better than the truck owner's. At this moment, just as Long Xinyan was so scared that her entire body was covered in cold sweat, she clearly saw Yunjian looking at her from the corner of her eyes. She smiled coldly and opened her red lips, saying something that made Long Xinyan's spine go numb. Don't meddle in things that you shouldn't meddle in. Otherwise, you'll be the next to die. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2514. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Long Xinyan was so frightened by Yunjian's silent words that her upper body trembled violently. She sat on the bench and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Long Xinyan managed to stabilize herself in the end. Otherwise, she would have fallen to the ground. Xinyan, what's wrong? A girl sitting beside Long Xinyan asked when she saw Long Xinyan's body trembling violently as if she was threatened. Long Xinyan seemed to have been called back to her senses. She suddenly came back to her senses and blinked her eyes in a daze. She turned around and saw Yunjian sitting next to Long Xinyan's table. She was wearing a pair of disposable gloves and peeling the crayfish as if nothing had happened. Even the warning Yunjian said to her did not seem to have happened. Long Xinyan felt a chill run down her spine. She swallowed a mouthful of crayfish. Her favorite crayfish was now tasteless. Too scary, this woman is too scary. Long Xinyan did not dare to think about Yunjian anymore. She closed her eyes and did not dare to say anything about what had just happened. Obviously, no one saw Yunjian's silent warning to Long Xinyan. Diao Xiaozhan was eating the crayfish in big bites while giving Yunjian a thumbs up. You're indeed the president of the shrine. You're amazing. I saw that if you had led your shrine to participate in the provincial tournament last year, then your shrine would have won first place in the provincial tournament. I heard that you can add people to the tournament before it starts. President of the shrine, why don't you bring your club to the tournament as well? I reckon that with the 2 moves you just showed, you can easily take the top 3 places in the national martial arts competition. Diao Xiaozhan was speaking the truth. That's right. Why didn't you take part in the tournament? Someone from the War Society said after hearing Diao Xiaozhan's words. He felt sorry for Yunjian. Facing the Combat Society member's question, Yunjian pressed her lips together without saying a word. Seeing that Yunjian did not say anything, Diao Xiaozhan and the others were very smart and did not press her. It was a frightening farce. Although no one said anything, their hearts were still unable to recover from the shock for a long time. That baby shop was indeed worth a visit. It was different from other baby shops. Whether it was the baby toys or the clothes that the baby wore, they were all designed by the shop owner. The 2 little ones would definitely like it. When she returned to her place at night, Shinji, who had been appearing and disappearing mysteriously, called her. Hey, I didn't expect the call to go through. You actually returned to the agent circle and signed a new contract with the website. 006. Do you know that after you came back, the base price of my mission dropped from $50 million to $30 million? Tell me, how are you going to calculate the missing $20 million? Shunji scolded Yunjian angrily as soon as the call connected. Yunjian's lips curved slightly. She spun the phone in her hand and said, Then what do you want? Fight me to your heart's content. I've developed a few new moves recently. 006. Believe it or not, I'll definitely surpass you this time. It had been so many years. Back when Shinji, Mad Dragon, and Slaying God left in Hun, Shinji had not given up on his dream of surpassing Yunjian. He kept mentioning it. Yunjian smiled faintly when she heard Shinji's words. She said, Deal. I'll wait for you at the entrance of the World Martial Arts Competition Arena in Country Z's Liao Province at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. The loser will treat us. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25:15. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. As soon as Yun Jian finished speaking, Shinji hung up with a beep. Yun Jian knew Shinji's personality. Based on her personality, she should have left all the internal and external forces of the Soul Eater organization and rushed over from abroad. After all, to Shinji, defeating Yun Jian and surpassing Yun Jian's achievements was her only dream. Yun Jian tossed her phone on the bed and stood up to stretch before heading to the bathroom for a shower. She had called Shinji to Liao province for no other reason than to get her to spend $1 million USD. They had been rivals for so many years. It was only right for Shinji to treat her to a meal. Reality proved that Yun Jian knew Shinji very well. Shinji hung up the phone and rushed to Liao province without even putting on his clothes properly. Shinji was Yun Jian's rival. The two of them had known each other since they joined the Enhan organization. This was different from the friendship between Yun Jian and Muing and Enhan. Yun Jian had never treated Shinji as a friend. The two of them were rivals who competed against each other. However, after so many years, the two of them had gone from being insignificant dust particles who could die at any time when they first joined Enhan organization to being the top figures in the international scene. The only thing that didn't change was that they still treated each other as rivals. This was a completely different way of getting along with Yun Jian, Snake, Lizard, Qing Yu, and Lan Su.
Snake.
Lizard, Qing Yu, and Lan Su only listened to Yun Jian's orders. Shinji, on the other hand, only treated Yun Jian as her rival, someone to surpass. The two of them could climb to this height because they competed against each other. The next day, the national martial arts competition would be broadcasted to the world at 6 in the evening. It was still 5 in the morning. Yun Jian went to bed early and woke up early the next morning. She went to the nearby gym with Emo Bufan and the others to train for the whole morning before heading to the arena at noon. Emo Bufan and the others were rehearsing for the competition at night. Yun Jian sat on the side and watched, giving them pointers from time to time. Halfway through, Emo Bufan and the others were thirsty, but they couldn't leave because of the rehearsal. Yun Jian didn't refuse and went outside to buy them mineral water. There weren't any big supermarkets near the arena, only a small shop. After buying a pack of water, Yun Jian habitually handed the shop's Shinji to the shop owner. The owner had been waiting for Yun Jian to give him change, but was surprised to receive a bank card instead. This is a small business. I only accept cash. In this day and age, there were very few places where cards in could translation. Is there a bank bar translation is translation is there a bank street translation nearby? Is translation is translation lufifi translation is translation is translation. Yun Jian accepted the card and was about to withdraw the money. Are you here to buy water for the members of the martial arts club? We are here to help the organizer buy water for the members of the martial arts club. How about I pay for the water with the money given by the organizer? You can take it first. An elegant male voice sounded. Yun Jian turned her head and saw a handsome, highly recognizable boy about 184 meters tall talking to Yun Jian. Thank you. Yun Jian glanced at the boy. After saying this, she walked over to pick up the mineral water she had just bought and walked to the arena. Was she going to let him stay to pay the bill? The handsome and highly recognizable boy touched his hair. He couldn't help but call out to Yun Jian, who was about to leave. Wait, can I ask what your name is? Perhaps he felt that his question was a bit abrupt. The boy laughed dryly and then continued to speak. My name is Tang Xiaoming. What I mean is, can you leave your name and which team's martial arts club you're giving the mineral water to? When the time comes, we'll distribute the mineral water at the same time. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin. Chapter 25:16. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. There was nothing wrong with Tang Xiaoming's words. Yun Jian didn't take the water from Tang Xiaoming for free. Instead, the organizers had planned to distribute the mineral water to every member of the martial arts club. Yunjian just took it early. Taking it early meant that Imo Buffon and the others wouldn't be able to get the mineral water when it was time to distribute, so they had to register in advance. Yunjian, shrine. She didn't stop moving forward or even turn around. Those indifferent words came out of Yunjian's mouth. With one hand in her pocket, even if she was carrying a cheap white plastic bag, it didn't reduce Yunjian's aura at all. Tang Xiaoming took a few more glances. Brother, are you dumbfounded? Don't forget that you still have a delicate fiancé at home. The one your parents set up for you. The boy standing next to Tang Xiaoming waved his hand in front of Tang Xiaoming's eyes a few times to attract Tang Xiaoming's attention back. Tang Xiaoming came back to his senses and scratched his head habitually. Don't mention her. I feel weak all over when she's mentioned. Imo Buffon and the others rehearsed until the afternoon when the competition was about to start. Yunjian went out for a walk before coming back. Yunjian had already expected that this national martial arts competition would be broadcasted to the world, so there would be constant rehearsals before the competition. It was simply unrealistic for Yunjian to be obedient and line up in the queue to rehearse. Therefore, she refused to participate from the beginning. At that time, Yunjian had just returned to the arena. The arena was very big. Imo Buffon and the others were now at the competition venue. Yunjian had just entered the arena, and there weren't many people lingering at the entrance. Suddenly, a coquettish female voice sounded from the other side of the arena. Xiaoming, wait for me, Xiaoming. Don't walk so fast, I can't catch up with you. Coincidentally, not long after the voice rang out, Tang Xiaoming, who was 184 meters tall, had a handsome appearance, and had a rather high discernment level, quickly walked over as if he was avoiding the plague. Behind Tang Xiaoming was a young girl, who was speaking to Tang Xiaoming in a coquettish voice. Xing, can you stop following me? Tang Xiaoming stopped halfway and looked at the girl helplessly.
Why?
I'm your fiancé. Why can't I follow you? Could it be that you have another girlfriend behind my back, Xiaoming? The 17-year-old girl, who was called Xing, looked at Tang Xiaoming with a bitter expression. She looked like a resentful wife. The girl's full name was Zhang Zexing. When Tang Xiaoming heard this, he slapped his own head. Just as Tang Xiaoming patted his head, wondering how to get rid of his fiancée, who had been ordered by his parents, he suddenly saw Yunjian walking past him. The next second, Tang Xiaoming walked over and pointed at Yunjian. He said to Zhang Zexing, "That's right, I have a girlfriend. She's my new girlfriend. Are you satisfied now?" "You're lying," Zhang Zexing retorted after hearing Tang Xiaoming's words. Although Zhang Zexing looked childish, she wasn't too stupid. "Xiaoming, you lied to me. You don't even know her name, and you said she's your girlfriend. You did it on purpose." Before Zhang Zexing could finish her sentence, Tang Xiaoming interrupted. "I didn't lie to you. Her name is Yunjian." Zhang Zexing. She squeezed her tears and suddenly snorted at Yunjian and Tang Xiaoming. Then, she turned around and ran away. Tang Xiaoming only heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Zhang Zexing disappear from his sight. Then he smiled at Yunjian. "Sorry, I used you to chase away the fiancé my parents gave me." Tang Xiaoming wasn't the kind of person who was very friendly. Although he used Yunjian a little, he didn't touch Yunjian. He didn't even touch Yunjian. There's no need. Yunjian was indifferent. Just as Yunjian finished her words and Tang Xiaoming was about to say a word of thanks, Yunjian suddenly dodged to the side and dodged a flying kick from a woman in her 20s who rushed in from the entrance. Then, in front of Tang Xiaoming, Yunjian raised her leg and kicked the woman in her 20s into the abdomen of the woman who suddenly attacked Yunjian. The woman took 2 big steps back and steadied herself. This sudden scene made Tang Xiaoming, who wanted to say another word of thanks to Yunjian, dumbfounded on the spot. However, he saw Yunjian's cold smile. She looked at the woman who attacked her sneakily. In front of the passers-by and the shocked Tang Xiaoming, she said to the woman, "You came here to fight me. Let's make it clear in advance. If we fight, I'll treat you to a meal if you lose. You lost to me by 1 move. It just so happens that I've taken a fancy to a pastry master in country F who made a pastry worth 500,000 yuan. Remember to treat me to it next time." Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 25:17. The pastry master from Country F made pastries that others couldn't imitate, and they were mellow and smooth. It was guaranteed that after eating them once, you wouldn't be able to resist eating them again. Unfortunately, this pastry master loved money as much as his life. Others didn't sell expensive pastries, but he asked for dozens or even hundreds of times more. Of course, to the upper class of the world, a pastry worth 500,000 RMB wasn't that expensive. After all, the most expensive pastries in the world could be sold for tens of millions of RMB. Of course, pastries worth tens of millions of RMB not only had a lot of variety, but they were also large. The pastry master would need half a year to make them. Also, Yun Jian and Shinji couldn't eat that much. Of course, since Yun Jian had let Shinji come to Country Z, Yun Jian didn't plan on letting Shinji go back just like that. She would have to eat at least tens of millions of RMB before letting her go. F***CK 006, you're tricking me. 500,000 RMB? No way. I can't afford it. Shunji's sneak attack failed again. She steadied herself and was the first to refute Yun Jian after hearing her words. Tang Xiaoming was standing next to her. He was a typical campus hunk, and the way he talked to girls was also typical of campus. Tang Xiaoming had seen many types of girls. Some were coy, some were seductive, and some were pure. Usually in school, boys like Tang Xiaoming who were tall, good-looking, good at basketball, and had a good family background were very popular. There would always be girls around him. But Tang Xiaoming had never seen a girl like Yun Jian. Not only did Yun Jian's friend come to her, but she didn't rush to hug her. Instead, she kicked her. What was even more strange was that Yun Jian dodged her friend's kick and said something like that. She opened her mouth and asked for a pastry worth 500,000? Even Tang Xiaoming, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, couldn't say something like that. Because he didn't have the capital to say something like that. What was even stranger was that Yun Jian's friend called her 006? It's okay if you can't afford it. Just then, Yun Jian pursed her lips and spoke again. After hearing Yun Jian's words, Tang Xiaoming let out a sigh of relief. She must have been joking just now. Before Tang Xiaoming could finish his thought, however, Yun Jian's next words shocked him once more. I'll be able to make up for it if I snatch a few more missions from you. Shunji panicked when he heard this. F***CK. Please, I'll treat you. Shunji squeezed the words out through gritted teeth. The former would cost 500,000 renminbi just to treat a piece of cake. The latter would lose 10 million USD. Even if Shinji was an idiot, he knew what to choose. That's a good boy. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes with a smile. Shinji was speechless. Why did she feel like she'd been set up by someone? Just as Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and looked at Shinji's expression, a phone call interrupted their conversation. Not long after she picked up the call, Yun Jian's smile faded. She told the person on the other end, "I'll be right back," and hung up. But before Shunji could speak, Yun Jian grabbed her by the shoulder and dragged her out. Before she left, Yun Jian turned her head slightly and said to the dumbfounded Tang Xiaoming, "Help me tell the leader of the shrine, Mo Bufan, that I have something urgent to attend to and will leave first. Tell them to focus on the competition." Before Tang Xiaoming could react, Yun Jian grabbed Shinji's shoulder and walked out. Country Z's Longmen City. Chu Ning and the others who had just received the news could not believe their ears. Chu Ning shook her head. She stared at Lu Cheng and asked, "That's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. Instructor Yu. How could he already? Dead. Chapter 25:18. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1 Yu Shaoluo. How could he be dead? Ever since Gu Junjian led them into the special forces, Gu Junjian had arranged for them to go to Min City's military academy. Yu Shaoluo was the military officer there. Although 3 years in high school was neither too long nor too short, Yu Shaluo was definitely an excellent soldier after getting along with him for 3 years. Moreover, he was only in his 30s. He still had a long life ahead of him, and he had yet to get married and have children. The 6 members of Team Monarch almost fainted when they heard the bad news. The members of Tier X Squad and Strongest Squad had never interacted with Yu Shaluo before, so they did not know what kind of person he was. However, when they heard the bad news, all of them lowered their heads without exception. As a military officer who had returned from overseas, Lu Cheng was proud of the special forces who had returned from overseas. Although he looked down on Yun Jian and had even done some despicable things, at this moment, the corners of his eyes were bloodshot. He stood on the spot in a respectful military posture to show his respect. However, as the commanding officer, Lu Cheng wiped away his tears. He looked at everyone and said after 2 seconds of silence, "I've met Yu Shaluo before. I've met Yu Shaluo a few times before. A few months ago, he was sent to rescue Z country's citizens who were trapped in N country. Unfortunately, he was attacked by the enemy and was hacked to death. And now, his corpse and his head are hung on the flag of country N by the people of country Z. His bones are still warm. This time, I, Lu Cheng, will participate in the mission to rescue the people of country Z. I must bring his corpse back." Country N was a country with an imperfect legal system. A few months ago, there was a sudden riot in country N. Many country Z citizens who went to country N to work and earn money were trapped in country N. In a country with an imperfect legal system, it was very scary when there was a riot. Massacres of country Z's citizens on the streets, wars, and so on. These were things that ordinary people thought were far away and impossible. However, in a country with a riot, it was real. Moreover, the reality was always crueler than one could imagine. Rape of women on the streets and gang rape of women were trivial matters. During the riot in country N, the country N people even chopped off the heads of country Z citizens and used them as balls. Women were skewered and barbecued like animals. Don't feel disgusted. It was the truth. A few months ago, Yu Shaluo was sent to country to rescue the country Z citizens who were trapped in country. What was more, the enemy of country's Yu Shaluo was to the enemy. It was an insult. If such a thing happened to anyone, as long as it was a person, when they saw their own people being humiliated like this, they would definitely be infuriated. Now, Lu Cheng was going to country and to support the rescue. Sir, team, monarch, team, squad, team is team. Even if we is instructor, is translation, is translation? Translation is translation. Lu Shiyan clenched his teeth and clenched his fists. His entire body was trembling, but his words resonated with everyone. Is translation team? Team is team. There were there is?
There was is.
With your skills, you're not special forces who have returned from overseas. What are you going to do? Is to die. R. Lu Cheng's shout sounded like he was looking down on the 6 members of Team Monarch, just like before. However, everyone present could tell that Lu Cheng was trying to protect the 6 members of Team Monarch. He did not want them to be in danger. After all, country N was in a riot. Going to country N now was tantamount to entering a smoke-filled battlefield. Tanks, planes, and cannons were places where one could lose their life if they took cover in the wrong place. Lu Cheng dared not let the 6 members of Team Monarch go to such a dangerous place. This kind of mature adults should be handed over to them to do. Little brats. Why are you interfering? Tier X Squad and Most Awesome Squad knew that their strength was not enough to help. They might even drag the team down. Therefore, they did not say anything. However, just when the atmosphere was at its coldest point, a female voice that was always arrogant but ignited the hope of everyone present suddenly rang out like a vast thunderclap. Team Monarch, Slashing God, is heading to country End to provide support. We must bring Instructor Yu back. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25:19. Yun Jian's words were like a grenade that exploded on the spot. giving everyone hope for survival. If one were to say that everyone's emotions were at their lowest point at that moment, the future that everyone was looking forward to was replaced by despair. Then, Yunjian's words were a voice that ignited everyone's fighting spirit and hope. Yunjian. Tears streamed down Chu Ning's cheeks the moment she saw Yunjian. She forced herself to stay calm, but once she thought about it, she could not help the uncontrollable tears that streamed down her cheeks. Retired veteran Ge Junjian requests to return to the team and provide support. Just as Yunjian's words fell, a powerful but irrefutable statement followed by Yunjian's voice reverberated in all directions. Perhaps there were deserters on the battlefield. Perhaps Lu Qing used to look down on Yunjian and the others and did some despicable things, but he would never run away in times of crisis like those deserters on the battlefield, because that was his duty as a soldier. The moment he saw Yunjian and Ge Junjian, Lu Qing clenched his fists again. He pursed his lips and tears rolled down the corner of his eyes, but one could feel the welcome he had for Yunjian and Ge Junjian. Get ready to assemble with the main force. Let's go. Lu Qing tacitly agreed to Yunjian and Ge Junjian's move. The 6 members of Team Monarch did not insist on going because they knew that they were not strong enough to go to a real battlefield like that. If they went, they might just be a burden. At that moment, the 6 members of Team Monarch once again felt the difference in strength. As a member of Team Monarch, Yunjian would not be a burden if she went. Their strength was far from enough. They had to work harder. Yu Xiaoluo was Ge Yunjian's former comrade and Ge Yunjian's best friend. Yunjian could tell that although Ge Junjian did not say anything, his heart was bleeding the moment he heard about Yu Xiaoluo's sacrifice. You will never know how many great people have sacrificed their lives for the peaceful, serene, and lawful society that you live in. It is said that you only have one life, but they would rather sacrifice themselves in exchange for a lifetime of peace. There were still many countries in the world that were still at war. Someone once calculated that in the recorded history of mankind, there had only been a short 100 years of peace without war. This was a very shocking number. They could gather at the entrance of the military base and set off. They didn't even need to prepare their luggage to go home, because it was still unknown whether they could return safely from this trip to N country, let alone bring their luggage. Yunjian, Lu Qing, and Ge Junjian had just reached the entrance of the military base when they saw Shenji still standing there. Seeing Yunjian, Shenji walked over. Seeing Shenji, Lu Qing was still rational. He said to Yunjian, "Hurry up and let your friend go back. We have to get ready to go." Lu Qing was doing it for Shenji's sake. After all, a battlefield like this was not suitable for Shenji. Because in Lu Cheng's heart, he thought that Shenji was just an ordinary girl who had nothing to do with this. That was all. With that, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. In the next second, Yunjian suddenly placed her hand on Shenji's shoulder. Right in front of Lu Qing, Ge Junjian, T-Rex Squad, Most Awesome Squad, and Team Monarch who came out behind them, she told Shenji something that stunned everyone. It has been almost 10 years since we were sent to the battlefield together. Are you interested in going to the battlefield with me again and killing everyone? If you want to chat about Campus Rebirth, the strongest female secret agent with more like-minded people, follow me on WeChat. Talk about life, find friends. Chapter 25-20. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. When Yunjian, Shenji, and Mad Dragon were in Anhun, they stood out from the other assassins trained by Anhun. After a few years of training, Yunjian, Shenji, and Quang Long were the only ones who survived among the thousands of people. As an assassin and an agent, they had to be proficient in all kinds of cold weapons, light weapons, and heavy weapons. They had to learn how to adapt to all kinds of situations. Because they had to go on all kinds of missions, they had to come into contact with a lot of things. If they wanted to successfully complete their missions, they had to learn all kinds of weapons. Not only did they have to understand how to use the weapons, they also had to be able to use them as if they were real. In other words, they had to be very familiar with the use of the weapons. And the best place to practice using all kinds of weapons in the world was the battlefield. In this world, many countries were at war. Back then, Yunjian, Shinji, and Mad Dragon were thrown into the battlefield of a country and were forced to learn all kinds of combat skills. Planes, cannons, tanks, they were all proficient in them. Because only by learning how to use all kinds of weapons could they have a chance of surviving. That was why Yunjian said, "It's been almost 10 years since we were sent to the battlefield together." Perhaps in the ears of the surrounding people, this sentence seemed to be something inconceivable and non-existent. But to Yunjian and Shinji, it was as simple as eating and sleeping. Officer Lu Cheng, as well as the members of Tier X Squad, Strongest Squad, and Team Monarch, who had come out to send them off, were all stunned. "Godslayer, you've been on the battlefield together?" Dong Lijia of the Strongest Squad looked at Yunjian and Shinji and asked in a daze. Dong Lijia was now deeply grateful to Yunjian. When she heard Yunjian's words, she was only stunned for a moment. She didn't mean anything else. Dong Lijia, on the other hand, was tightly holding the hand of Zhu Ao, the leader of the Strongest Squad. Luckily, Zhu Ao wasn't a heartless person. Last time, Dong Lijia had given him her virginity and was saved by Yunjian. He was dating Dong Lijia now. "Not only have we been on the battlefield together, but we've also gone through the Amazon forest and swept through the Sahara Desert together. We've been to many places." Hearing Dong Lijia's words, Shinji laughed. She put an arm around Yunjian's shoulder and looked at Dong Lijia innocently. It wasn't until Yunjian's sharp eyes glanced over that Shinji retracted his hand. "So, are you interested?" Yunjian's question rang out again, as if she was repeating it. "Yes, yes, yes. I'll go wherever you go," Shinji said immediately. As soon as he said this, everyone felt that Shinji and Yunjian's friendship was indescribably good. Lu Cheng was worried about Shinji, but Shinji was Yunjian's friend. He shouldn't be weak. Since you are friends, remember to take care of each other when you enter the battlefield. The battlefield is not a game. When Lu Cheng said this, he was very serious. Chu Ning, Chu Xiangnan, and the others all looked expectantly at Yunjian. Just when everyone thought that Yunjian and Shinji were close friends, Yunjian and Shinji looked like they were close friends. Shinji suddenly clicked his tongue and then mercilessly mocked her in front of everyone. "Friends? Who's friends with her? 006, and I will always be enemies. 006, you have to be careful. Don't get blown up by my sneak attack."
Ha!
Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 25-21. Page 1/1. Hearing Shinji's words, everyone was shocked. "Not friends? Then why do you know each other so well? Who are you trying to fool?" When the people present heard Shinji's words, their faces froze and they cried out in surprise. "Yeah, if they're mortal enemies, why do you know each other so well? If they're mortal enemies, wouldn't you want nothing more than to cut each other into pieces?" After the last mission, Zhu Ao had matured a lot. After hearing Shinji's words, he paused for a moment, then spoke up. "You don't look like a bad girl. If she really wanted to do something bad, she wouldn't have told him directly that she was going to attack him." Lu Cheng didn't understand Shinji. He pinched his temples as he spoke. "Not friends? Why does she know each other so well? What a strange girl." At that moment, Yunjian pursed her red lips in front of everyone. Just when everyone thought that Yunjian would refute, or at least say that she and Shinji were friends and that they just liked to bicker with each other, Yunjian suddenly said to Shinji in front of everyone, "I'll be waiting. Just don't get killed by my countercannon. Don't blame me for not collecting your corpse." After Yunjian said this, everyone was completely shocked. How is this the way a normal friend would talk? What was the relationship between the two of them? "Let's go." Just then, a large van drove up to the entrance of the military base. A staff member stuck his head out and called out to Lu Cheng and the others. "Let's go." Lu Cheng saluted the members of the three teams, as well as the entrance of the military base. His eyes reddened as he turned around and walked into the bottom of the van, climbing onto the back. This van was originally used to transport goods. It was very big. Once the back door was closed, it was surrounded by airtight walls. Yunjian and Shinji were the second to easily jump into the back door of the van. Good Junjian followed closely behind. After the group of people got on the van, the door was closed by the man who was driving the van. He was dressed like a staff member. This man dressed as a staff member was actually a soldier who had been sent as reinforcements. It wasn't easy to cross the border of N country. Of course, there was already a riot in N country, so they couldn't care that much. So all the special forces sent as reinforcements sat in the back of the van, making up the numbers and sneaking into N country. There were already quite a number of people sitting in this large van, all of whom were dressed normally. As soon as Yunjian entered the van, someone lit up the light for Yunjian and the others. Both Yunjian and Shinji had excellent night vision, so they could see the people inside the carriage clearly. With the light, the interior of the van stand out. There were more than a dozen Special Forces soldiers in the carriage. They were all dressed in ordinary clothes and had rifles in their hands. It looked like they were resting with their eyes closed. The Special Forces soldier who lit the lighter glanced at Yunjian and Shinji, then said to the four newcomers, "Go ahead and pick up a weapon. Go to the side and pick a weapon that suits you. Our car hasn't reached the border of country N. When we reach the border, the real battle will begin at any time." With that, the Special Forces soldier looked at Yunjian and Shinji. "Little girls, remember to follow behind us. Don't go against those people." Shinji wasn't happy with that. She immediately replied, "Remember to follow me. I'll make sure you don't die." Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 25-22. Shinji was a rather casual person. She would never force herself to say anything she wanted to say. As a result, these extremely arrogant words, which sounded to the ears of outsiders, were blurted out just like that. Yunjian only glanced at Shinji. She didn't reach for the guns on the side. Instead, she leaned on the side and closed her eyes to rest. "Little girl, you've got some guts." The Special Forces soldier laughed after hearing this. Actually, to everyone in the car, this trip to N country was a matter of life and death. Perhaps they would never be able to return to their beloved country. But at this moment, no one was afraid. The Special Forces soldier chuckled and looked at Shinji. He introduced himself with interest. "I'm Shinji. My name is Jingning. My surname is Dan." Everyone was named Jingning. Seeing that Yunjian had already sat down on the ground, Shinji also sat down, ignoring Dan Jingning. Dan Jingning wasn't angry. He laughed happily. His 40-something-year-old face suddenly had a trace of amusement on it. He had been determined to die in this mission and had lost all hope for the future. These two girls, one was very arrogant, the other completely ignored him. Perhaps the arrival of these two girls would bring a trace of joy to the last journey of his life. The van drove for a day and a night before finally arriving at the border of N country. There were people guarding the border of N country. They were probably part of N country's civil war. The driver had obviously forged a pass. At the entrance of N nation's border, after showing the military personnel their passes, they drove the large vans into N nation's territory. But just as the van was allowed to drive into N country's border, everyone in the car was on high alert. If they were discovered by the people outside, they would be greeted with a bloody battle.
"Get down."
Just as everyone relaxed their vigilance, a clear voice that only the people in the van could hear suddenly rang out. The voice came from Yunjian's mouth. The people in the van didn't have time to understand what Yunjian meant, but they were all martial artists. Their bodies were one step ahead of their heads. When they heard Yunjian's words, they silently lay down on the floor of the van. Tut tut, tut tut tut. Just then, a burst of machine gun fire came from outside. The thin walls on both sides of the van were shot through. If they had been standing just now, they would have all been killed. This burst of machine gun fire, no one had given any warning. It was almost as if the sound had come out of the blue. Even the Special Forces soldier in the driver's seat, who was disguised as a worker, felt his eyelids twitch. But he couldn't speak. If he revealed even the slightest flaw, the army would discover the dozen people in the van. Finished. There's no sound of people inside. It's definitely the goods. A soldier from N country walked up to his leader and reported. Fire, the leader said. At this time, the Special Forces soldier in disguise drove the van and smoothly drove into N country's border, until they stopped at a safe area. The Special Forces soldier in disguise opened the back door. Seeing that everyone was fine, he let out a sigh of relief. And at this time, the soldier, who called himself Dan Zhengyu, looked at Yun Jian. With a face of shock, he asked on behalf of everyone, Young lady, how did you know that group of people would shoot at our van? If Yun Jian hadn't discovered it, everyone in the van would have died. And even if they didn't die from the bullets, they would have been discovered by the people outside and killed. Just when everyone was looking at Yun Jian, they saw Yun Jian's red arc slightly pursed. She indifferently opened her mouth and said something that shocked everyone present. I heard the sound of him pulling the gun. Chapter 25-23. When Yun Jian finished speaking, everyone present was shocked again. The sound of the gun being pulled and the gun being prepared to fire was very subtle. Just now, the group of N country soldiers outside the van were talking loudly in N country's voice. Yun Jian was actually able to hear the person outside pulling the trigger to fire a round inside the van to check if there was anyone inside in the shortest time possible despite the disturbance. Yun Jian's ears were so sensitive. You can even hear that. Dan Zhengyu's eyes widened as he looked at her with a face full of horror. Yun Jian nodded. All right, let's go meet up with our own people and discuss the plan. At this time, the Special Forces soldier disguised as a staff member wiped his sweat and closed the back door of the van. He walked back to the driver's seat and continued to drive. After that, they didn't encounter such a frightening situation again. At this time, the group had already been sent to an extremely remote place. This was the hiding place of the Z country's people who came to N country's aid. At the same time, there were many Z countries' ordinary refugees hiding here. They couldn't return to their home country because they came here to work and earn money. A few months ago, there was an internal riot in N country. N country's forces began to madly slaughter Z country's people. Some Z country's people were even beaten up by N country's people with sticks until their heads were bleeding. Even blood directly gushed out from their brains. Among the Z country's people hiding here, some had unfortunately lost their parents. There were also some who were chased by N country's people and were stabbed several times, but stubbornly found a place to hide. In the end, they were rescued by Z country's people who came to help. When Yun Jian walked in, she saw many wounded people. A few Z country's female military doctors were treating their wounds. Among these Z country's female military doctors, there was a female military doctor with very smooth skin and very beautiful looks. However, she was indeed wearing very simple rough clothes. She walked towards the Special Forces soldier who disguised as a staff member and brought them into N country. Zhang Heng, you know that we don't have enough military doctors, so you brought us 2 new military doctors? The beautiful female military doctor glanced at Yun Jian and Xinji, then nodded at Yun Jian and Xinji. Then she spoke to the person disguised as a staff member. The staff member disguised as a Special Forces soldier, the man named Zhang Heng, heard the female military doctor's words and reached out to scratch his short hair. Then Zhang Heng shook his head and said to the female military doctor, No. They're here to help us fight. What he meant was that Yun Jian and Xinji weren't here to be military doctors.
Ah.
The female military doctor was stunned when she heard this. After all, people who could go to war. It was unheard of for a girl to go to the battlefield. Can they really fight on the battlefield with their skinny arms and legs? Another female military doctor who had just finished checking on an injured patient came over and stood beside the pretty female doctor, looking at Yun Jian and Xinji doubtfully. Just now, this little girl saved a whole car of people. Dan Zhengyu couldn't help but say. Hearing this, The female military doctors and the group of injured people all blinked in shock. "We don't have enough weapons. Now we need to go out and get some guns from the N people," Zhang Hang said. Zhang Hang was about to tell Yun Jian and Shinji to stay here for a while. But before Zhang Hang could finish, Shinji heard him and suddenly became excited. She turned to look at Yun Jian. Suddenly, in front of the female military doctors, the group of injured people and all the special forces soldiers, she arrogantly gestured to Yun Jian. 006, what do you think? Do you want to go steal some tanks from the N people to practice? Let's have a competition. Whoever steals the most tanks in 10 minutes wins. The winner will treat us to a feast. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 25-24. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. As soon as Shinji finished speaking, everyone was shocked. Especially the female military doctor, who had come over to question whether Yun Jian and Shinji could really go on the field with their skinny limbs. This female military doctor was called Wang Xuefei. She was a battlefield female military doctor. The other one was very pretty, and she was the first to greet Zhang Hang. Her name was Zhang Meili. Zhang Meili, as her name suggested, was indeed very pretty. When she heard Yun Jian and Shinji's conversation, Wang Xuefei froze. Dan Zhengyu, Zhang Hang, Zhang Meili, and the others who were standing nearby, as well as the injured lying on the ground, were completely stupefied by the conversation between Yun Jian and Shinji. It should be known that Zhang Hang and the others had sneaked out to steal firearms from the people of N country during the riots. It was very dangerous for them to return with firearms, and they could lose their lives at any time. But this woman who came with Yun Jian actually said to Yun Jian that they were going to steal tanks from the N nation people for fun. The two of them wanted to compete to see who could steal the most tanks. What were they doing? Were they daydreaming? Even Lu Cheng's face was pale with fright. After all, Yun Jian and Shinji had been brought here by Lu Cheng. Gu Junjian had retired, and Lu Cheng was Yun Jian and Shinji's superior. Before Yun Jian could reply, Lu Cheng frowned and scolded Yun Jian and Shinji. "Don't mess around." With that, Lu Cheng turned to Zhang Hang. "I'll take good care of them." Zhang Hang seemed to be the person with the highest rank in this temporary hideout, so everyone listened to him. He was the one who had brought everyone into N Nation not long ago, pretending to be a worker. When Zhang Hang heard Lu Cheng's words, he nodded lightly at Lu Cheng. He didn't care about what Shinji said to Yun Jian. He waved at the people holding rifles and led everyone out of the hideout. Shinji had always been a man of his word. He didn't take Lu Cheng's words to heart. Instead, he walked over to Yun Jian, grabbed Yun Jian's shoulders, and was about to lead her out. Then it settled. The winner pays. Shinji didn't care about what the others thought. But just when everyone thought that Yun Jian would agree, Shinji said, "Yun Jian." With a smack, Yun Jian slapped Shinji's hand off her shoulder and crossed her arms over her chest, looking at Shinji in disdain as she spoke in front of everyone. "Are you trying to trick me? The winner pays."
Shinji.
If Yun Jian didn't win, Shinji would claim that she was the one who beat Yun Jian. And if Yun Jian won, she would have to pay. Shinji was really good at scheming. But she found out.
Ha.
Then I won't go. Shinji saw that her scheme had been discovered and turned to leave. Yun Jian didn't stop her. "Where is your friend going? It's dangerous outside. Your friend is so pretty. If she meets N Nation people, then..." Zhang Meili was kind. She quickly walked over and asked Yun Jian. Shinji was the kind of person who showed her fierceness on her face. Yun Jian was the kind of person who hid a knife behind a smile. Zhang Meili didn't dare to ask Shinji directly because her expression looked fierce. She turned to Yun Jian. Yun Jian heard this and pursed her lips. Before Yun Jian could say anything, Shinji heard Zhang Meili's words. She turned around and spoke in front of everyone who thought that she and Yun Jian were good friends. "Friends? 006, and I will always be enemies." 006. I promised you to come to the battlefield to compete with you. Just you wait. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 25-25. Page 1/1. Lu Cheng and Gu Junjian already knew that Shinji and Yunjian didn't get along, but Wang Xuefei, Zhang Meili, Zhang Hang, and the others thought that Shinji and Yunjian were friends. After all, only friends would say things like, whoever wins gets to treat, right? But when they heard Shinji's arrogant words, they were all stunned. Before they could recover, Yunjian stretched out her thumb and brushed it across her red lips. She smiled playfully. Then, in front of everyone, she suddenly spoke to Shinji, who was leaving the hiding place. She used words that were several times more arrogant than Shinji's. 095, I accept your challenge. But before that, don't die on this battlefield, or I won't collect your corpse. 095 was Shinji's number. The two of them had always called each other by their numbers and in Hun. Hearing Yunjian's words, everyone was stunned again. After all, Yunjian and Shinji's words and actions, as well as the way they talked, were very unusual. Not only did they call each other by numbers, but they also refused to admit that they were friends. How could friends be like this? And Shinji's murderous aura was fierce, as if she was determined to fight Yunjian to the end. It was as if she would never be satisfied until she defeated Yunjian. I love hearing that. Shinji suddenly smiled a hair-raising smile. In the next second, she disappeared from her hiding place. Lu Cheng and Zhang Meili didn't even have time to call her back before she was gone. When Zhang Meili finally reacted, her expression changed. She immediately shouted at Yunjian, "Your friend went out. You didn't stop her?" This morning, a woman was gang-raped on the streets. And country is in chaos right now. It's not as simple as you think. Hurry up and get your friend back. Zhang Meili didn't dare to go out herself. This hiding place was very well hidden, at least for now. Country's people wouldn't be able to find this place. But recently, Zhang Hang had also discovered that Country's forces were moving towards this place. In a few more days, their hiding place here would become unsafe. They had to find a new hiding place and move their hiding place in time. Otherwise, if they were discovered by the forces of Country, they would probably die without a burial place. Zhang Meili was pretty, and there were so many Country people outside. She didn't dare to chase after Shinji, so she could only say this to Yunjian. Zhang Meili meant well. After all, normal people wouldn't say such things to Yunjian at a time like this. Since Meili had spoken, it was time for Yunjian would go find Shinzi's. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Yunjian merely pressed her lips together. She had no intention of going out to look for the man. Instead, she went to the stairs and sat down in front of everyone, not minding the filth. She closed her eyes and said, "I'm sorry. Just let her leave. She won't die anyway." The way he said it, when everyone heard this, they were even more stunned. How can you be so vicious? Even if she's not your friend, she should be someone who came with you. How can you do this? Wang Xuefei didn't like Yunjian and Shinji at first. The two girls were actually here to support the battle. Now that she heard Yunjian's words, she was even more pissed. Before Wang Xuefei could finish, however, Yunjian spoke before her. What she said struck fear into everyone's heart. "Don't worry. With her strength, she won't die. She won't die on the battlefield. If she dies, she'll die by my hands." Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 25-26. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. When they heard Yunjian's first sentence, everyone thought that Yunjian and Shinji were just sharp-tongued, but they actually had a good relationship with each other. It was the kind of person who had a sharp tongue, but both of them treated each other as their best friends. However, when they heard Yunjian's next sentence, everyone lost their composure. What did she mean by, "if you die, you'll die by my hands." Everyone was stunned when they heard Yun Jian's words, especially Wang Xuefei. She couldn't refute Yun Jian's words. Yun Jian wasn't lying. Shunji was almost invincible in this world, except for Yun Jian. Only Yun Jian had the ability to send Shinji to his death. "I know that girl. She's very powerful, so don't worry about her." Gu Junjian spoke up. Gu Junjian didn't actually know Shinji. However, he knew that he already knew Yun Jian's identity. She was Slaying God, the #1 secret agent in the world. This meant that Shinji, who was by Yun Jian's side, must have a powerful background as well. People like Yun Jian and Shinji wouldn't die here so easily. Especially people like Yun Jian and Shinji. The treatment they received in the past was probably much crueler than what they received on the battlefield. Moreover, Yun Jian knew Shinji very well, so Gu Yunjian's words were purely to help Yun Jian cover up her lie. When they heard Gu Yunjian's words, everyone silently agreed and kept quiet. After all, no one had forgotten their original intention of coming here. Those who were present did what they were supposed to do, and those who had nothing to do closed their eyes and rested, because there was no telling when a fierce battle would break out. At night, Zhang Heng and the rest returned from outside. The people who followed Zhang Heng out were more or less armed. It was obvious that they had taken these guns from the N Nation people. At that time, after Zhang Heng and the others entered the hiding place, a few people behind them supported a more seriously injured person into the hiding place. The people who went out were more or less bruised. The people who were quickly helped in later were the most seriously injured. Both of his legs were hit by bullets.
Quick. Quick.
Take a look at his injuries." Zhang Heng shouted at the female military doctors with a wretched expression. Hearing this, Wang Xuefei was the first to rush forward. Although Wang Xuefei was very doubtful of Yun Jian and Shinji's strength, she was still very responsible. But just as Wang Xuefei was about to disinfect the wound and remove the bullet, a clear female voice rang out before she could. "It's easy to get infected if you clean the wound directly." Wang Xuefei was stunned when she heard the crisp female voice. When she saw that it was Yun Jian, she cast a sidelong glance at her. "Do you know medicine? Aren't you here to support the battle?" If Yun Jian was also a female military doctor, Wang Xuefei wouldn't have doubted it. But Yun Jian was a special forces soldier. She was here to support the battle. How could she know medicine? But while Wang Xuefei was still in shock, Yun Jian had already taken out a certificate from her trouser pocket and threw it in front of Wang Xuefei. She looked ahead indifferently and didn't even look at Wang Xuefei. Just like that, she walked toward the injured person. At the same time, everyone's eyes widened. This is the certificate of a top international medical expert. There is a seal on it. His wounds must be treated immediately, or there will be a risk of amputation. Please make way. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-27. Yun Jian didn't reveal her identity as the Hand of Death. She didn't want to cause trouble. Yun Jian had specially prepared this international top medical expert certificate just in case. Sure enough, when they heard Yun Jian's words, the people who were about to scold Yun Jian for causing trouble all widened their eyes. International Top Medical Expert Certificate? This thing wasn't that easy to obtain. To obtain this thing, one had to be an international top medical expert. Wasn't she here to support the battle? How could she have such a thing in her hands? After hearing Yun Jian's words, everyone present was dumbfounded. By the time everyone came back to their senses, Yun Jian had already replaced Wang Xuefei and walked to the injured team member. Holding a scalpel, she cleaned the scalpel in the fastest way possible. Following a very standard and skillful knife technique, she removed the bullet from the injured team member and cleaned the wound. 10 minutes later, the surgery that would have taken a few hours was completed by Yun Jian, just like that. At the same time, Yun Jian tied 2 bow ties around the wound on the team member's legs. At that time, everyone had yet to recover from their shock. Change the dressing on time. I'm going to rest. At this moment, Yunjian stepped on the edge of the certificate that she had just thrown on the ground. Her foot sent the certificate flying into the air. She gently reached out her hand and grabbed the document without even looking at it. She didn't even bend her back. She stuffed the certificate back into her trouser pocket and walked away after saying this. Seeing this, Zhang Heng heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he looked in the direction Yun Jian had left in for a few seconds. He had already cursed several times in his heart. Damn it! Where did this talent come from? He actually met her. However, Zhang Heng didn't say anything else. The next day, Yun Jian was woken up by the commotion at the scene. She wasn't in a deep sleep, so she woke up quickly. She stood up and went downstairs. Then, Zhang Heng said to everyone with a pale expression, "Everyone follow Officer Ge Junjian and evacuate quickly. Move quickly. Our hiding place has been discovered. It's the people from country N. They are now attacking us with tanks. If we're any later, all of us will die here." Zhang Heng's words made everyone turn pale with fright. Everyone was so nervous that their expressions changed drastically. A few ordinary people from country Z were so scared that they started crying in public. After saying this, Zhang Heng led a group of Special Forces soldiers who had come to support the battle in the direction of the N nation's tanks. They had to find a good place to block that group of people and fight for a chance for everyone to escape. By the time Zhang Heng and the others arrived at the scene, the people from country N had already started to drive their tanks over while firing their cannons. Firearms were completely useless against tanks. "Captain, what should we do?" Someone looked at Zhang Heng and asked. "We have no choice but to use grenades and human flesh." Zhang Heng clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. The bottom of the tank was the fatal point. If he wanted to blow up a tank, he would have to rush to the bottom of the tank with a bag of explosives and use his own death in exchange for the destruction of the tank. And now, there was no other way. Just when everyone had lost the confidence to survive, they could only stall for a little bit of time so that the people behind them could escape quickly. However, one of the enemy's tanks suddenly changed direction then, with a boom. This tank suddenly helped them and bombed Country N's tanks. This was definitely a shocking scene. But just as everyone present was shocked by the scene in front of them, they couldn't believe that the enemy's tank would suddenly bomb their own tank. Zhang Heng suddenly looked into the distance. He remembered that when he came out, he seemed to have seen Yun Jian not leave with the main group. Instead, she followed them here, but now she was nowhere to be seen. His pupils suddenly widened, and in front of everyone, he was shocked. "That tank, it's her. It's her. She really stole the N Nation's tank." If you want to talk about Campus Rebirth, the strongest female agent with more like-minded people, follow Excellent Reading Literature on WeChat. Talking about life, looking for a confidant. Chapter 25-28. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Many colors flashed across Zhang Heng's face at this moment. However, from the colors in his eyes, one could tell that he was deeply shocked by what was happening in front of him. "Captain, you're saying..." Even the group of special forces beside Zhang Heng, who were also dressed like ordinary refugees but carrying guns in their hands, who had come all the way from Z country to provide support, widened their eyes in surprise when they saw the enemy tank in the distance, suddenly helping them fight against their own tank. Ge Junjian led everyone to retreat from the rear while Lu Cheng followed Zhang Heng and the others to defend against the attack of the N Nation people. This was the original arrangement. At this time, after Lu Cheng heard Zhang Heng's words, his pupils suddenly widened to the maximum. He stared at the tank that suddenly helped them to bombard the N Nation people and said in shock, "Could it be her? It's really her. It's the killing god."
Boom, 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 boom.
In the next second, Lu Cheng's words were drowned out by the explosions of the tanks that had suddenly turned around to attack them. If a tank wanted to turn, it would be a little cumbersome. Of course, it would vary from person to person. It was just like driving a car. Some people were nimble when driving a car and could even drive through a distance of 1 millimeter. However, Some people were clumsy when driving a car and might even crash into the wall when the rear of the car was still a few meters away from the wall behind because of a miscalculation. Driving a plane, a ship, and a tank was the same as driving a car. Of course, most people who drove a tank would not be able to drive as agility as a car. After all, even the lightest tank weighed a few tons or dozens of tons. Of course, this was only true for most people. For Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, Lu Cheng, and the others who had just laid down in their hiding spot and prepared to fight to the death with the N Nation people who had tanks, they were not only shocked by how the tank was robbed by Yun Jian. What was even more frightening and shocking was the operating skills of the tank in front of them. The N Nation people sent 7 tanks to attack them. One of them was hijacked, and it was 6 tanks against 1. However, the tank that was hijacked by Yun Jian moved the tracks on both sides of the tank fiercely in the opposite direction. After the tank made a half-turn, it immediately stopped and directly shot one of the tanks. After that, the tank that Yun Jian had hijacked flew forward. Taking advantage of the few seconds when the other tanks had yet to react to why their own tank had suddenly attacked them, they hesitated about whether to counterattack.
Boom, boom, boom.
A series of explosions rang out. The remaining 5 tanks were blown up one after another in front of the enemy commander. Hat. What's going on? You're crazy. Was he crazy? Quickly bomb this tank. He was crazy. Helping the enemy bomb us? He's crazy. At this moment, the enemy commander retreated with a frightened expression. His body trembled as he shouted out these words. He thought that there was something wrong with the tank driver on his side. However, just as the enemy commander thought that there was something wrong with the tank driver on his side, the enemy troops carried explosives on their backs and were ready to rush to the bottom of the tank and blow up the tank's tracks at any time. However, just as the enemy was about to take action, the top door of the tank opened. A petite figure jumped out of the top door of the tank in front of the enemy commander. The local commander, who originally thought that something was wrong with his pilot, saw this petite figure and was so frightened that his expression changed abruptly. With a trembling voice that could be heard by Zhang Heng and the others, he said in a trembling voice, "What's the matter? It's a woman. What's going on? How could it be a woman? When did she replace our driver and sneak into the tank? It's too terrifying. This woman. Too terrifying." Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-29. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. He had seen with his own eyes how the tank driver had entered Tucker's gate and operated the tank. He had not noticed anything amiss along the way. This woman, when did she sneak in? Commander, One of the enemy commander's subordinates saw this and came to the commander's ear to ask for instructions on what to do next. Retreat. We're retreating. The enemy commander was frightened by Yun Jian, who was standing on top of the tank and looking down at the entire battlefield. Even though he was leading over 1,000 men and had the support of the original 7 tanks, he was still completely shocked by Yun Jian's methods. The group of people quickly turned around and retreated. Zhang Heng and the rest who were standing far away were stunned when they saw this.
Haha.
Lu Cheng, I didn't expect you to have such a powerful subordinate under you. After recovering from the shock, Zhang Heng patted Lu Cheng's shoulder and laughed out loud. Although Zhang Heng and the rest did not understand what the group of N Nation people were saying, they could tell that the group of N Nation people were probably planning to retreat. They did not even want to kill Yun Jian, who was standing on top of the tank and looked so easy to deal with on the surface. Sir, you're too kind. Lu Cheng heard that he was praised by his superior and naturally felt an indescribable joy in his heart. Moreover, Yun Jian had turned the tables in the previous deadlock. 7 tanks against them. They were definitely going to die. But at this moment, the N Nation people were planning to retreat. However, just as the N Nation commander was about to lead his men to retreat, a soft and indifferent voice that could make one's hair stand on end and tremble uncontrollably suddenly rang out. You guys still have delusions of leaving this place alive? Yunjian's words were spoken in a very authentic N-nation language in front of everyone. Her voice was cold, and there was no emotion in her words. When they heard this, not only did the N-nation commander and the 1,000 men who followed him turn around in shock and stare at Yunjian, even Zhang Heng and the rest who were far away thought that Yunjian was crazy. Zhang Heng had a subordinate who knew N-nation language, and he translated what Yunjian had said to the group of people who were about to leave. Crazy. Didn't she know that N-nation was currently in a state of chaos? Riot. The forces in N-nation are divided into several factions. They kill the Z-nation people as they please. How many innocent women were killed? Some were even gang-raped on the streets. Now that we've met this group of natives, it's already a blessing that they're willing to leave without doing anything. But what is she doing? Does she know that she's also a woman? If he were to be caught by the N-nation people, he would be in utter misery. It wasn't just physical humiliation, it was mental devastation. It would be worse than death. All of you stay here. I'll go and bring her back. Zhang Heng threw the rifle in his arms to one of his subordinates, grabbed a dagger in his hand, and jumped away from his hiding spot. However, just as Zhang Heng jumped out of his hiding spot and was about to walk over to Yunjian, a voice suddenly rang out. F***ck. This woman was courting death. Brothers, let's fight it out with her. The subordinates of the N-nation's leader were the first to voice their displeasure. Don't kill her. Capture her alive. Destroy 6 of our tanks, and everyone will take turns to F***ck her to death. Words like these rang out loudly. With that, the N-nation group suddenly rushed toward Yunjian, who was standing on top of the tank. F***ck. They didn't believe that they couldn't even capture a woman alive with their thousands of people. However, just as the enemy leader's subordinates rushed toward Yunjian, exposing their true nature to the extreme, Yunjian didn't wait for the crowd to reach her. In front of Zhang Heng and the others in the distance, she flashed an extremely strange smile at the enemy leader and the thousands of people. In the next second, she smoothed out the curve of her mouth and grinned like a harmless little girl. Suddenly, she waved gently at the enemy leader and the thousands of people. Time's up, farewell, everyone. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2530. If it weren't for the fact that Yunjian had destroyed 6 tanks at the same time, everyone would have thought that she was just a harmless girl the moment they saw Yunjian smile. She was innocent, pure, and out of this world. Even Zhang Heng, Lu Cheng, Dan Zhengyu, and the others in the distance had the same illusion. Yunjian might really be a harmless girl. That faint smile made everyone stop in their tracks. Don't just stand there. Come with me to save her. It's impossible for her to deal with thousands of people alone. Zhang Heng fastened his dagger to his waist and rushed toward Yunjian. When the rest of the people heard Zhang Heng's words, they quickly followed Zhang Heng and approached Yunjian. However, just as Zhang Heng and the others moved forward with all their might to save Yunjian, they were less than 3 meters away.
Boom, 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 boom.
A series of explosions took place. The moment the explosion sounded, Yunjian jumped off the tank easily and walked toward Zhang Heng and the others. Just as Zhang Heng and the others had yet to realize where the series of explosions came from in the distance, the commander of Country N and his nearly 1,000 subordinates were already shouting, "Landmines! Landmines! Everyone run! That woman planted landmines! It's all a trap! We've fallen into a trap!
Run!
Run! I don't want to die! Aha!" All kinds of screams rang out. At this moment, the battlefield behind Yunjian had turned into the entrance to hell. This group of Country N's unforgivable team who had used knives, sticks, and weapons to kill Z people on the streets and gang-raped Z women in front of them were buried in the series of landmine explosions behind Yunjian. The landmines at the scene were buried very well. The tank that Yunjian drove just now had led all of them to the center of the minefield. Not a single one of them had the ability to survive. They, Country N, should pay the price for bullying the Z people. It was clear that Yunjian was just a teenage girl, but behind her were countless battlefields. It was clear that she was looking at thousands of enemies. However, she was not afraid in the face of danger and displayed a deterrent aura that others could never achieve in their lifetime. She had set up a strategy that could eliminate thousands of enemies without her personally. Looking at the continuous explosion of landmines behind Yunjian, they saw that Yunjian seemed to be unaffected by the ground tremors caused by the landmines and the deafening explosions. At that moment, she put her hands in her pockets and walked toward Zhang Heng and the others. Seeing this scene, Zhang Heng and the others seemed to see a ruler descending. It was as if she had the power to dominate the world. In this place, she was the king. After some time, the explosion of landmines explosions finally stopped. Yunjian's also Zhang's. At this moment, Zhang Heng opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just as everyone wanted to ask Yunjian how she could stand out, Yunjian suddenly looked behind them and said, "Thank you for your hard work." With that, Zhang Heng and the others were stunned. Hard work? What hard work? Zhang Heng and the others were stunned. They turned around and saw that Shinji, who had left yesterday, was already standing in front of them. Before anyone could react, Yunjian pursed her red lips again. Ignoring the people in front of her, she spoke again to Shinji behind her. Compared to 10 years ago when we worked together to blow up 100,000 enemies in Country L, I'm more satisfied with this cooperation. Chapter 25-31. 10 years ago? The 100,000 people who died in an explosion in Country L? Yunjian's words stunned Zhang Heng and the others. What did she mean by the 100,000 people who died in an explosion in Country L 10 years ago? Had they been on the battlefield before? Lu Cheng suddenly remembered that Yunjian had told Shinji that it had been almost 10 years since they had been sent to the battlefield together. Lu Cheng, who recalled this, lifted his head abruptly to look at Yunjian with widened eyes. Could it be? That thing really did happen. Yunjian didn't see everyone's reaction. She ignored Zhang Heng and the others and looked at Shinji. Hey, compared to the battle to the death in Country L 10 years ago, I prefer today's cooperation. Shinji suddenly smiled eerily. The next second, Shinji raised his head and looked at Yunjian with his chin. He repeated, "But only today. 006. Next time, we'll have to rely on our own abilities. I will definitely surpass you. Just you wait." Shinji had never changed his belief. In other words, surpassing Yunjian had become Shinji's motivation to survive. It was an indispensable source of motivation for Shinji. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and silently agreed. By the time they found the new hiding place that Gejunjian and the refugees from Country Z had found, it was already the morning of the next day. As soon as he saw Yunjian and the others return, Gejunjian and the others surrounded them and asked worriedly, "Are you hurt? Bro, you're lucky to have a daughter like this." Zhang Heng's first words were praise for Gejunjian. Hearing this, Gejunjian was confused. Wang Xuefei heard Zhang Heng's words and was very suspicious. She looked at Yunjian and couldn't help but ask, "She didn't drag you down, right?"
Huh?
Zhang Heng laughed and pursed his lips after hearing Wang Xuefei's words. Then he said to Wang Xuefei in front of everyone, "If it wasn't for her yesterday, all of us would have died on the battlefield." Because everyone had nothing to do, Zhang Heng deliberately kept them in suspense. Hearing this, everyone became more interested in Yunjian. "Captain Zhang, quickly tell us, what happened to you? Also, would that group of people from N Nation come looking for him? Will it be dangerous for us to stay here?" Someone hurriedly asked after hearing Zhang Heng's words. "Is it really that powerful?" Wang Xuefei pouted, unconvinced. After Wang Xuefei said this, Zhang Heng added, "The team from Country, and we encountered this time, sent 7 tanks over. When a man and a tank clashed head-on, anyone would know who had the upper hand." Then, Captain Zhang, are you all right? One of the refugees asked nervously after hearing Zhang Heng's words.
Of course I'm fine.
Then I have to tell you guys about Yun Jian's capabilities. She joined forces with that guy and killed the enemy commander and thousands of people. At that time, I was really scared. In his free time, Zhang Heng was also a person who liked to brag. Since everyone had nothing to do here, they listened to Zhang Heng's bragging. However, just as everyone was bragging the most, Yun Jian, who had been silently fiddling with her phone, suddenly stood up and turned the phone upside down. The screen was facing everyone, and she said something that made everyone's pupils shrink. My people are almost at the border of Country N. Do you want to leave Country N? If you want to leave, take advantage of the chaos after my people kill their way out of Country N's border.
M.
Chapter 25-32. This time, Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, and the rest brought Lu Cheng, Gu Junjian, and the rest of the special forces into Country N to provide support. Their mission was not to start a war with Country N. Their goal sounded simple, but it was rather difficult to achieve. It was to bring all the refugees from Country Z, who were scattered all over Country N, back to their country safely. No matter where you went in the world, the country would never give up on you. Therefore, Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, and the rest led the team and risked their lives to come to Country N. Of course, out of selfishness, they also wanted to bring back the bodies of their comrades who had unfortunately died in Country N back to their motherland. At present, there were hundreds of refugees from Country Z hiding in this hideout. Zhang Heng dared to take the risk of bringing Yun Jian and the rest into Country N because even if something unexpected happened, Yun Jian and the rest would definitely have the ability to protect themselves. However, this group of refugees was different. They were just ordinary people. If anything happened, they would definitely die. Moreover, with hundreds of people traveling together, it was very likely to attract attention. Therefore, Zhang Heng and the rest had been waiting for the opportunity to send this group of refugees back to their country. But now, Yun Jian suddenly stood up and told him that there was such an opportunity to send this group of refugees who had been innocently affected by the recent riot back to their country. This was great news for Zhang Heng and the rest. Just a moment ago, Zhang Heng was still bragging to everyone about Yun Jian's ability on the battlefield. At this moment, Zhang Heng had already jumped down the stairs and rushed to Yun Jian. He asked in surprise, "Really? Yun Jian, is the information you gave me accurate? What are the chances of success?" Yun Jian's words gave the refugees lying around a glimmer of hope for survival. However, just as a glimmer of hope ignited in everyone's hearts, Yun Jian suddenly said, 50%. After speaking, she emphasized again, "Only half of you here can leave Country N alive. When my people kill their way into Country N's borders, you must take advantage of the battle between the two sides to rush out of Country N's borders. Because if we win the battle, Country N will immediately send troops over. If you don't take advantage of the chaos and leave quickly, you'll be killed on the spot by the Country N army coming from behind. By then, none of you will be able to escape." What he meant was that if they wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to leave N country, they had to rush out of N country while Yun Jian's men were fighting with N country's troops stationed at the border. If he was careless and got hit in a vital spot, then he could only blame himself for being careless. All the refugees and special forces, including Zhang Heng, who had their hopes rekindled, fell into silence again at her words. What Yun Jian was implying was that out of the hundreds of people present, only half of them could leave Country N alive if they chose to leave. A 50% survival rate.
Why?
Why did we have to encounter such a thing? I'm just going to Country N for vacation. Why did something like this happen? Aren't you soldiers very powerful? It wasn't easy for us to survive until now, but you're telling us that only half of us can leave this place alive. I don't want to stay in this damned place anymore. You want to take us away. You're soldiers. You have to protect us unconditionally. Not long after Yun Jian said this, a trembling male voice that had been suppressed for a long time sounded. The person who spoke was a very inconspicuous middle-aged man squatting in the corner. This middle-aged man wore square-framed glasses and had the aura of a cultured person. My wife died a few days ago. He had been killed by those inhumane people from N country. I don't want to stay here anymore. Aren't you soldiers who serve the people? Then think of a way to get us out of here. Why must there be sacrifices? Aren't you supposed to protect our lives? If you can't even protect our lives, then what's the use of having you here? Perhaps it was because of fear. This middle-aged man who wore glasses and looked very elegant became agitated. When people were in extreme fear and panic, their humanity would be exposed to the highest point. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, those refugees who had been helped by Zhang Heng, Wang Xuefei, Zhang Meili, and the others could no longer hold it in. Because of the fear of death, they shouted endlessly. That's right. Didn't you come to country and to protect us? If you can't even guarantee our safety, then what's the use of having you here? You still call yourself soldiers. I think you're a bunch of cowards. Take us home. You said you'd take us home. We don't want to die. Why can't you soldiers rush in front of us to protect us?
M.
Chapter 25-33. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Only when one was forced into a helpless situation would the darkness of one's human nature erupt to the highest point. The reason why the people of N Nation killed Z Nation citizens and raped women for no reason was because of the chaos in N Nation. There were two factions fighting for the throne, and the people of N Nation had nowhere to go. Without the restrictions of the country's laws, the immoral things that people could do were countless times more disgusting than one could imagine. Z Nation's laws were perfected, so robberies, murders, and rapes were greatly reduced. N Nation was now in a state of being without a ruler, let alone laws. In a society governed by law, there would still be rapes, robberies, and murders. Imagine what would happen in a country without laws and without restrictions. The middle-aged, bespectacled man, who usually looked like a gentleman, but at this moment, he was showing off the ugliness of human nature to the extreme. Everyone present protested loudly. Bring us home safely. Bring us home safely. Bring us home safely.
Yeah.
With the middle-aged man with glasses taking the lead, all the refugees raised one hand and shouted. When they were first rescued by Zhang Heng and the others, this group of refugees had just escaped from death. At that time, to this group of refugees, it was already very good to meet the people sent by the country to save them. That was already a blessing from the heavens. Because if they had not met Zhang Heng and the others sent by the country to protect them, they would have been killed by the people of N Nation like the others. The women were directly sent to hell after their bodies were ravaged. But as time passed, everyone was already dissatisfied. It had been so long. Why was no one sending them back to their country? In the end, Yunjian announced in front of everyone that she could send them back to their country. But the survival rate was only 50%. They did not want to die. After seeing their relatives and friends being killed by the people of N Nation and dying in various ways, their fear of death deepened. So, they did not want to die and could not die. Everyone, be quiet. We will protect you from behind and do our best to let each and every one of you leave N Nation safely. So please be quiet and wait for me to finish, okay? Zhang Heng saw that all the refugees who were sitting on the ground had stood up. They were so angry that they looked like they wanted to kill someone. He tried to calm himself down, but his fists were clenched involuntarily. Of course, he wanted to send everyone back to Z country safely. His responsibility was to bring everyone present back to Z country safely. However, every day they spent here meant that they were in greater danger than before. Just like yesterday, if it were not for Yunjian and Xinji, Zhang Heng and the others would be the first to die, and then the refugees protected by Zhang Heng and the rest. Not a single person could have survived. Zhang Heng had wanted to communicate with the refugees calmly, translation, but the refugees refuted him even. Until we leave N Nation safely. N Nation is. You said that you will when the time is. Is when? Is the time? ISN, everyone. The middle-aged man with glasses translation is. That's right. You soldiers must bring us out safely. Otherwise, we will not listen. We will not be quiet. Zhang Heng's peaceful words attracted even more angry retorts. Just as the situation spiraled out of control, Yun Jian, who was already standing at the highest point in everyone's sight, spoke with a chilling voice. You're the one who's going to be killed. I still have 10 explosives. If you don't control your annoying mouths in 3 seconds, I will blow them up for you. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-34. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. This cold and emotionless voice resounded through the crowd. As soon as the voice rang out, everyone's gaze shifted from Zhang Heng to the pile of junk that was 5 to 6 meters high. At some point in time, Yun Jian was already standing on the pile of junk that was 5 to 6 meters high with ease, with her back to the group. This pile of junk was 5 to 6 meters high. Just looking at it gave people a feeling that it was on the verge of collapsing. If a person were to stand on top of it, there was even a possibility of falling off the tall and unstable pile of junk at any time. However, Yun Jian, who was the center of attention, stood on top of the pile of junk like a feather. She was so steady that no one could find any flaws. As soon as these frightening words left her mouth, everyone saw that she was playing with a few explosives in her hands. She was toying with the explosives fearlessly, as if she could ignite them at any moment. Everyone was so scared that they trembled violently. In less than 3 seconds, the discontented refugees all shut their mouths. Zhang Heng, Dan Zhengyu, Lu Cheng, the female military doctors, Wang Xuefei, Zhang Meili, and the others were all stunned by Yun Jian's intimidating aura. Just now, Zhang Heng had tried to persuade him with kind words, but it was useless. She was just a teenage girl, but she had single-handedly forced all the refugees to shut their mouths. Captain, this little girl is really a talent. If we have the chance to return to our country, we must report this to our superiors. A Special Forces soldier standing next to Zhang Heng saw this and whispered in Zhang Heng's ear. Zhang Heng didn't reply, but he knew what was going on. This group of refugees finally quieted down completely. At this moment, Yun Jian suddenly threw the explosives in her hands onto the second floor. From the first floor, a hand suddenly reached out from the empty darkness next to the railing on the second floor. Shinji, who didn't live with the crowd, was already standing on the second floor. She caught the explosives that Yun Jian threw over. Seeing this, the group of refugees who had been unconvinced shut their mouths. Not a single person dared to utter a single word under such circumstances. I'll say it right here. Whether you live or die, it has nothing to do with us. It's our responsibility to save you. But why should we defend you from the enemies again and again just to save you? If we save you, will you take care of us in our old age? If we save you, will you give your lives to us? If we save you, will you do anything for us? Yun Jian suddenly said. When these words were said, the refugees standing on the flat ground were completely speechless. Yun Jian's lips suddenly curled into a red arc. Her indifferent and cold expression made the group of refugees panic for no reason. Just as the group of refugees fell silent, Yun Jian spoke again. This time, the group of refugees turned pale with fright. I'm the one who gave you the 50% chance of survival this time. Since I gave you a 50% chance of survival to leave country, and I have the right to take back this 50% chance of survival. Wait for your deaths in country and... Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 25-35. Every word that Yun Jian said pierced into their hearts. If the bespectacled man who had started the uprising was still dissatisfied with Yun Jian's statement that they only had a 50% chance of returning to country alive, then this time, Yun Jian would even take back the 50% chance of survival that she had given them. If they stayed in country, and they would definitely die. You bunch of inhumane people. Just wait to die in country and... At this moment, a refugee who had not spoken since the beginning, an old man who was in his 50s and close to 70 years old, suddenly spoke. As the old man spoke, he hugged his chest and huffed angrily. Just as he said this, the old man leaned against the corner of the wall and sat down. After he sat down, he used the tone of an elder to berate everyone present. Captain Zhang can bring people to country and to save us. Don't tell me his own situation isn't dangerous now. Don't tell me his soldiers aren't in danger now. Why did they take such a risk to come to country and to save us? They could have just stayed in their own countries and not gotten involved in any danger. Are you their relatives or friends? Let me ask you, bunch of crazy people, has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Go to hell. Now, even your last chance has been ruined by yourselves. Anyway, this old man already has one foot in the coffin. Just wait for your deaths. Although this old man was old, every word he said was the truth. After he finished speaking, the group of refugees in the downtown area all shut their mouths. Most of the refugees, including the bespectacled middle-aged man, lowered their heads. Not long after, someone said to Yunjian, Zhang Heng and the others, "Sorry, we were wrong. We shouldn't have done this." With one person taking the lead, everyone followed suit and apologized. However, Yunjian did not have any reaction. She jumped down from the 5-meter-tall pile of debris and walked to the side. Everyone listen to me. We have been hiding in Country N, and there are already Country N's troops targeting us. It's impossible for us to hide every time, and it's also impossible for us to win against Country N's troops every time, because we only have so few people. This is probably really the last chance. Whether you choose or not, it's up to you. But here, I, Zhang, express that as soldiers, we will do our best to bring you back home. Zhang Heng waited for everyone to calm down before speaking. If it was said that Yun Jian and Zhang Heng's words had attracted the sarcasm of all the refugees, then at this moment, all the refugees were grateful. In the end, it was only when good Junjian stepped in that Yun Jian agreed to reveal the exact time of the battle between her people and the N people. When Yun Jian's men fought against the army at the border of N country, they had to send someone to kill the leader of the army directly to have a chance of winning. I'm the best at sneaking in and killing the leader of a place. After all, I used to be a spy. Let me do it, Zhang Heng said to a female Special Forces soldier beside him. However, when everyone heard the female Special Forces soldier's words and decided to let her try infiltrating the base, the female Special Forces soldier's voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly, everyone's vision blurred. They saw that Yunjian was already dressed in a tight suit and tight pants. There was a pistol strapped to her thigh and 2 butterfly knives on both sides of her waist. It was the standard female Special Forces outfit. While everyone was stunned, she said something that made everyone present, including Zhang Heng, Zhang Meili, and all the refugees, stunned. Damn. No one is better at assassination than me. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 25-36. In the blink of an eye, Yunjian had already changed into her outfit for the mission. This scene stunned everyone present. The next second, everyone regained their senses. Are you sure you can do it? When it comes to assassinating the leader of a target, you can only succeed once. Otherwise, you won't have any chance of success if you send someone to assassinate him again. Miss Inu used to be a proper female spy. She even participated in a mission to eliminate a smuggling group 8 years ago. As a female spy, she infiltrated the smuggling group and hid for 5 years. Finally, she became the new leader of the smuggling group and uprooted the entire smuggling group. When it comes to assassination, it's not about brute force. Although I heard that you know how to drive a tank, Miss Inu is still the best at assassination. The bespectacled middle-aged man who had led the protest earlier, who usually looked refined, stood up and said. The middle-aged man who was leading the protest was called Heewon. It was a very simple and honest name. He was born a farmer and spent a few years studying. His academic results were so good that he was always the top student in the city. Because he was too focused on his studies, he even wore glasses. However, when he was in his second year of high school, something happened to his family, and Hyun dropped out of school. After that, he wandered around in society and came to country and to work. He used to be a genius in his studies. Without nurturing, he was no different from an ordinary person now. Now, in order to survive, he refuted Yunjian's words after hearing them. Inyu was the female Special Forces soldier who used to be a spy. Her full name was Lu Inyu. Lu Inyu had been with the refugees since a few months ago. In country N, where their lives were in danger and they didn't know if they would have a tomorrow, the refugees only knew to listen to Lu Inyu and the others talk about how they used to be Special Forces soldiers. Everyone took turns telling stories to pass the time. Hyun had heard about Lu Inyu's past as a female spy from a group of Special Forces soldiers, so he quickly spoke up. Actually, most of the refugees present apologized after hearing the old man's words because they were afraid that Yunjian wouldn't even give them the last chance to return to their country because of this. The assassination of the leader of the army guarding the border of country and was to allow Yunjian's men to easily subdue the army. To put it bluntly, it was to create more chances for them to escape. Thus, Hyun, as well as all the refugees present, naturally hoped that the strongest among them would assassinate the other party's leader. That's right, let Miss Inyu go. Miss Inyu's strength is obvious to all. After Hyun finished speaking, someone immediately spoke up. I support Miss Inyu. I support Miss Inyu. The crowd became rowdy again. Yunjian ignored him this time. She bent down and picked out a dagger from the pile of weapons at the side. With the blade facing down, she held the hilt and walked out. She didn't explain, but she didn't follow the group's instructions either. Why don't we go together? Lu Inyu was a very reasonable person. Seeing that the people around her refused to stop talking, she readied her weapon and jogged after Yunjian after saying what she had to say. Currently, in country, Zizja province, Longmen City, Chin Yuru was arranging her photo album. There was a pile of photo albums on the floor. Ding dong, the doorbell rang then. Chin Yuru glanced at the two fellows and her son. Seeing that they were having fun on the sponge cushion, she went to open the door. It was her next-door neighbor. After chatting for a while, Chin Yuru came back. She happened to see the little girl babbling, Mama, Papa. The little girl was holding a family photo in her hand. The girl suddenly folded the photo and giggled. Si's thin lips in the photo and Yunjian's pink lips in the photo were stuck together because of the folding. Mama, Mama, Mama. Papa, Papa. Hee kiss kiss kiss.
M.
Chapter 25:37. Page 1/1. Even though it was just one photo, it was enough for Chin Yuru's imagination to roam. Even Chin Yuru's face flushed at the sight of it, despite her shrewd countenance. Yuan, you can't fold photos randomly. The little girl frowned as she looked at the family photo. Because the little girl folded the photo, Ce and Yunjian's lips kissed. She seemed to understand what this meant. Chin Yuru was afraid that these children would mature early, so she quickly walked over and tried to snatch the photo from the little girl's hands. Papa, Mama, Papa, Mama, Papa.
Papa. Yeah.
The little girl frowned. Her two small hands, which were as small as a mature adult's finger, grabbed the photo tightly and refused to let go. Papa was the word for mother-in-law, which was not pronounced properly. She was calling Chin Yuru. The little girl seemed to want to express something. Since the little girl's hands were small and tender, Chin Yuru did not dare to use too much force. Hence, she was unable to pull the photo out of the little girl's hands. She gave up helplessly. Fortunately, there were no sensible children or adults around. Otherwise, she would have been embarrassed to death. Kiss, 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 kiss. The little girl was having a lot of fun folding the photo. In the end, sleepiness overwhelmed her. When the little girl fell asleep, she hugged the photo that was folded to show Ce's thin lips kissing Yunjian's red lips and fell asleep. Chin Yuru took this opportunity to gently take the photo out of the little girl's hands. Then, she put it together with the stack of photos on the ground and hid it. When the little boy saw Qin Yura leave, he looked left and right. Suddenly, he crawled in front of the little girl and lowered his head. He imitated the way Ce usually kissed Yunjian. He kissed the little girl's forehead and giggled again. Back at the scene in N country, the group planned to break through the N country's border troops. Yunjian, wait for me. Let's plan how to sneak in and assassinate him. Lu Yinue caught up with Yunjian and asked. When Lu Yinue said this, her voice was extremely soft. The people in the vicinity were all from N Nation. During the riot, the N Nation's treatment of the Z Nation's people could not be described with the word reckless. If the two of them were discovered, they could even predict what would happen to them. She would become the plaything of tens of thousands of men. Her body and mind would be destroyed, and she would die. The army's camp is just ahead. Wait for me outside, and don't come in. Yunjian only left Lu Yinue with this sentence and walked forward. Hey you. Hearing this, Lu Yinue walked over and grabbed Yunjian's arm. It's too dangerous for you to go alone. Let's go together. Yunjian blinked. She wanted to refuse, but after thinking about it, she said, the military camp stationed here is very large. It can be divided into the East and West military camps. The head of the military camp is in the East military camp. If you want to think of a way to attract most of the people from the East and West military camps to the West military camp. 10 minutes will do. After saying this, Yunjian did not wait for Lu Yinue's reply and left in a flash. The technology in N country was not advanced, and there were no cameras in the military camp. It was already very impressive to have a camera here. Yunjian had already found the head of the military camp.
It was a huge open space.
There were countless stars in the sky. In this open space, there were many naked women and girls lying on the ground. Moan. Why aren't you moaning? B*T. Move your hips. F*CK. This was simply a scene of promiscuity. Countless N Nation people were riding on top of the women and girls who were obviously captured from Z Nation. They were doing extremely disgusting things. One of the N Nation people rammed into the motionless body of a woman whose mouth was full of blood. The woman did not make a sound. The N Nation person pulled out a knife and stabbed the woman who had no desire to live to death. He was still speaking in N Nation's language. B*TCH, if you don't listen, I'll kill you. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 25:38. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. There was no despair, only more despair. The group of women at the scene were all motionless. They had lost all hope in life. Some of them had witnessed their husbands being killed by the N Nation people a few months ago. Their families were all killed. This was the result of staying in a country where the law was not perfect and there was a sudden riot. Between men and women, the men were killed on the spot. As for the women, after experiencing physical despair, they were tortured to death by this group of people. There were some courageous women who had committed suicide long before they were humiliated. When Yunjian arrived at the scene, this was the scene she saw. The disobedient woman who was stabbed to death by the N Nation person groaned and died with her eyes wide open. She died with her eyes wide open. Damn bitch. F*CK. How dare you stare at me? Stare at me. I'm going to kill you. The N Nation person did not like the dead woman. He panicked, but he stabbed the woman's eyeball with the blade and gouged it out in front of everyone. You could never imagine what kind of cruel things a citizen of a country without law could do. The dozens of women at the scene were suffering a fate worse than death. Some of them were even tied up and could not even commit suicide. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. At this moment, she was standing at the top of the roof, looking forward. In her hands, there were 2 butterfly knives that gleamed with the light of the sword. Yunjian did not think that Lu Yinue would help. So, she held the butterfly knives and found the target. He was also riding on a woman like the N Nation people. Just as she was about to attack, someone is invading from the west. requesting backup, requesting backup. A loud voice was heard. However, a man from country and rushed in and shouted loudly. Hearing this, the Nation people around quickly put on their clothes and ran out. Only the leader was still riding on a woman and was in the final sprint. The rest of the women were all lying on the ground as if they were paralyzed. They had lost all hope of survival. Roar, roar, roar. The leader was as fat as a pig. He rammed into a woman and was in the final sprint. Just as the leader was about to end this wave of ramming, he suddenly heard a cold voice behind him. "Are you ready to pay for what you've done?" The sudden voice stunned the leader. He turned around like a robot. He thought it was the woman lying on the ground who wanted to attack him. Just as he was about to shout for the rest of his men to protect him, he saw an unfamiliar face. Yun Jian's slender figure was wrapped in a tight black shirt and pants. The butterfly knives on both her hands were facing down with fresh blood dripping from the blades. Her nonchalant expression made her look like a killer. The leader saw that the group of subordinates who were supposed to protect him were all lying in a pool of blood without making a single sound. You! The leader wanted to get out of the woman's body and escape, but he did not. In the next second, the blade in Yun Jian's hand had already cut his throat. At the same time, a sentence that made the leader completely sink into oblivion was suddenly heard. "Don't worry. You go to hell first. Soon, I will send all your men to accompany you." Top reading site, M. Chapter 25-39. Her words were so calm that it was as if she hadn't said anything. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the leader's eyes widened and he fell to the ground with a thud. His pupils didn't open or close for a long time. Obviously, Yun Jian's words made him die with his eyes wide open. This was his military camp. To him, without the military camp, it was equivalent to having nothing. Even his achievements after death would be reduced to nothing. Mission accomplished. Yun Jian took out her handkerchief and wiped the blood on the two butterfly knives gently as she spoke faintly, no one knowing who she was talking to. The next second, she glanced at the scene and said to the dozens of women lying on the ground, "You have 5 minutes left. Leave from the rear. You can directly escape from N country and cross the border of N country. There will be a national team outside to rescue you." Yun Jian's words made the dozens of women lying on the ground all turn to look at her. Yun Jian's eyes were glued to her two butterfly knives as she added with a curl of her red lips, "That's right, I'm not sure. I've already killed everyone here. Don't worry, you won't meet any N country people when you escape." As soon as she finished speaking, the group of women lying on the ground all got up from the ground and swarmed in the direction Yun Jian pointed. Yun Jian suddenly smiled. The next second, she took out the dagger that she picked up from the hiding place not long ago. When she turned around, the dagger in her hand flew towards the only surveillance camera in the dark before she turned around. With a poof, the surveillance camera was destroyed. Her red arc rose as she sneered, "What an eyesore." After meeting up with Lu Yinhua outside the military camp, the two of them returned to the hiding place. After returning to the hiding place, everyone asked about Yun Jian and Lu Yinhua. When they heard that the leader of the target military camp had been killed, the military camp was leaderless and began to fall into chaos. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They just had to wait for the military camp to fall into chaos tomorrow. Yun Jian's people would break through the border and take advantage of this opportunity to escape. After falling asleep in the early morning, Yun Jian opened her eyes a few hours later. It was dawn. "Big news, big news. I snuck out just now and heard about something big on the streets of N country." At this moment, a Special Forces soldier ran back with a black and white newspaper in his hand. "This is the newspaper I got from another country. It says that a woman suspected to be the #1 secret agent in China, slaying God, appeared at the military camp where Lu Yinhua and Yun Jian sneaked in yesterday. This is the woman's back view recorded by the surveillance camera." After this back view was leaked, I heard that it's exactly the same as slaying God's back view in the hands of a world-renowned photographer from a Western country who loves photography and is the only one confirmed to be the #1 on the International Secret Agent chart. So, we can further speculate that the woman who appeared in the military camp yesterday might be slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking. The Special Forces soldier held the newspaper in his hand and shouted in panic. As he spoke, he even showed the ambiguous photo printed on the newspaper to everyone. It was so ambiguous that no one could tell whether the person was a man or a woman. Inue Yunjian, did the both of you see someone else in the military camp last night? I'm afraid that person is the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking, slaying God. The Special Forces soldier exclaimed in surprise. Upon hearing that, everyone turned to look at Yunjian and Lu Inue. Just as everyone shifted their attention to Yunjian and Lu Inue, someone suddenly looked at the back of the person in the newspaper and pointed a finger at Lu Inue, exclaiming in shock, "That's right. This back view, why is it exactly the same as Yunjian's outfit yesterday?" Chapter 2540. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. As soon as the person spoke, everyone shifted their attention to Yunjian. Not far away, Yunjian was only wearing a casual outfit. The outfit was neither baggy nor tight, it was just the right size. Yunjian hummed softly in response when she saw that everyone's attention was on her. She did not panic like the others had imagined, nor did she refute in haste like they had imagined her to do after hearing the question. Instead, she wiped the 2 butterfly knives in her hands gently, tossed them aside, and put them back at her waist. Yunjian, which outfit were you wearing yesterday? Someone asked Yunjian with a slightly agitated tone, as if he had just discovered a secret. If Yunjian was really slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent leaderboard, she should have some reaction after being questioned, right? However, everyone saw that Yunjian was the first to walk out of the hideout after putting the 2 butterfly knives back at her waist. Halfway through, she glanced sideways and suddenly spoke to the crowd. "The outfit I wore yesterday is over there. I'll give you guys 10 minutes to gather at the entrance. I won't wait for anyone who's late." As soon as she finished speaking, Yunjian walked out of the hideout. Everyone knew what Yunjian meant when she said, "I won't wait for anyone who's late." If they were late, they would not be part of the escape plan this time. Therefore, everyone dared not be careless. However, before they walked out, the middle-aged man with glasses, who was He-Won, was the first to rush forward and hold up the tight-fitting outfit Yunjian wore yesterday. He compared the tight-fitting outfit Yunjian wore yesterday with the back view in the newspaper. Everyone's eyes widened at that moment. Yunjian waited for 3 minutes in the hideout before everyone came out one after another. "Looks like we've misunderstood. You're not slaying God, the #1 secret agent on the International Secret Agent leaderboard." A middle-aged man who walked out first smiled at Yunjian, awkwardly. "You almost scared me, but the style of the outfit is completely different. Also, I remember that Yunjian wore an outfit without any accessories at the back." Zhang Meili walked over and said, "This farce would end here." At that moment, Yunjian stood in front of everyone with her red lips pursed. She did not make a sound. She seemed to have expected this outcome, as there was no joy or worry on her face. The outfit was an assembled one. The accessories on the outfit could be removed at any time. Otherwise, Yunjian would not have allowed the security camera to capture her.
Boom, 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 boom.
Boom.
Boom, boom.
A series of gunshots were heard from afar. It was obvious that Yunjian's men were already engaged in battle with the assassins of the leader yesterday. Yunjian led a group of people to hide in the tall bushes. "Listen to my orders and wait for the right time. When I say run, no one is allowed to turn back. Charge forward with all your might. I'll tell you to run when the damage is at its lowest." Yunjian's gentle reminder was quickly drowned out by the sound of explosions and gunshots. Everyone nodded in unison. If one were to observe carefully, One would notice that the refugees from country Z were crossing their arms. Everyone knew that this was the key to their survival. It was the entrance to hell. If they could escape, they would live. If they could not, they would die. Just when everyone's hearts were clenched tightly and they could not breathe, Captain Zhang Heng glanced at Yun Jian's men bombarding the enemy from afar. Then, he looked at Yun Jian and asked Yun Jian under everyone's watchful eyes. How do your men possess such powerful firearms? The battle has been going on for almost 30 minutes. This level of firepower is comparable to an underdeveloped country. As far as I know, only the underground organizations in the world have such terrifying firepower. Top reading website. M. Chapter 2541. There was nothing wrong with Zhang Heng's words. Some small countries that were not developed, or even dependent on other countries, could not even produce such firearms. Talents were also needed for the production of firearms. Some countries did not even have such talents. They could not produce all kinds of firearms and ammunition in their own country, so they had to buy them from other countries. How could such a country be powerful? On the other hand, Yun Jian's people had so many firearms. This was not something an ordinary person could have. Have you heard of a saying? Yun Jian did not answer Zhang Heng directly.
She said.
What saying? Zhang Heng had a weed in his mouth and a hat made of weeds on his head as he retorted. The less you know, the longer you live. Or, do you choose to die now? Yun Jian's words came right after the sound of the sky-shaking cannon. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, but it reached everyone's ears. I still want to live for a few more years. Zhang Heng spat out the weed in his mouth and laughed. He did not press her further. Everyone around them was worried about their own safety. At this juncture, although Yun Jian and Zhang Heng's conversation was very interesting, their own safety was more precious. In a while, you will bring some people to cover them. Now give me all your sniper rifles. Yun Jian spoke again after Zhang Heng finished his sentence in a joking manner. What do you want to do? Zhang Heng asked again. As he asked, he also asked his men to give all their sniper rifles to Yun Jian. Zhang Heng felt that talking to Yun Jian was not like talking to a 19-year-old rookie in the Special Forces. Instead, it was like talking to a powerful veteran who had been on the battlefield for many years. Yun Jian did not reply to Zhang Heng's question. After all, the army stationed at the border had been stationed here for many years and was familiar with the terrain. It was not easy to kill them in a short period of time. For Muing, who was far away in Country Z, what was happening here was a completely different world. Perhaps from the moment Muing died for Yun Jian in the Enhun organization, she and Yun Jian were destined to never return to how they used to be. Muying's own physical body had actually disappeared from this world. Her consciousness had been extracted by a perverted doctor and forcefully stuffed into her current body. When Yun Jian found her and brought the Mad Dragon to her side, Muing had already accepted the Mad Dragon. But recently, Muing found that she often fainted suddenly. That feeling was the same as when she had died. In the past 2 days, she had suddenly fainted 5 times. Moreover, the frequency of her fainting had increased recently. Muing suddenly realized that before that perverted doctor had passed away, he had said that if it weren't for the unique potion he had invented to maintain her current state, her current physical body could push out her soul at any time. When the physical body completely pushed out the soul, she would, in a sense, die again. Before that perverted doctor died, he had said that this situation would usually occur 20 years after she had merged with her physical body. But now, could it be that it had been brought forward? So Muing had closed her door and refused to see anyone for the past 2 days. Even when Mad Dragon came to find her, she had used all kinds of excuses. In the end, Muing pinched her knuckles until her knuckles turned white. Then, she typed a text message on her phone and sent it out. Don't come looking for me again. There was no reason. But less than 10 minutes after this text message was sent, bang! The floor-to-ceiling window in Mu Ying's room suddenly made a crisp sound. In an instant, a tall man dressed in black used his body to directly break through the window and jumped in.
M.
Chapter 2542. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. She had no choice but to send that message to Mad Dragon. But Mooing didn't expect Mad Dragon to be loitering around her house. She also didn't expect that he wouldn't reply to her message. Instead, he would break through the floor-to-ceiling window and barge in. Mooing had no doubts about Mad Dragon's strength, but she didn't want to see him anymore. Why did he come looking for her? Mooing was originally sitting on her bed. When she saw Kwang Long walking towards her with a face full of hostility, she almost instinctively got up from the bed and ran towards the door. She tried to break through the door. She couldn't let Mad Dragon know that she didn't have long to live. She also couldn't drag him down, but just as Mu Ying's hand reached out to open the door to her room, her hand was tightly grasped by a large hand. Mad Dragon, like Yun Jian and Shinji, was always at the top of the world. His whole body emitted a ruthless aura of blood. It felt like he could kill someone at any time. Mooing knew that Mad Dragon wouldn't do anything to her. But when she thought of her body's condition and felt his ruthless aura, she panicked even more. "Let go of me, let go, or I won't talk to you anymore." Mooing desperately tried to pull her hand away from Mad Dragon's grip. "My little fool, where are you going?" Mad Dragon was still the same as before, showing a gentle smile. But this gentle smile, which was like a gentleman's smile, contained a murderous aura that outsiders couldn't feel. It wasn't that he wanted to kill Mooing. It was that Mad Dragon was an assassin. His words and actions couldn't be separated from the murderous aura of an assassin. This uncontrollable, ruthless aura made Mooing panic even more. "Darling, you came looking for me? I've missed you for a long time." Mooing knew that Mad Dragon would not give up. She rolled her eyes and hugged Mad Dragon, pressing her cheek against Mad Dragon's chest as if nothing had happened. After hearing Mu Ying's words, Mad Dragon grabbed her wrist and stopped pretending. "You want to get rid of me?" When Mooing heard Mad Dragon's words, she couldn't help but take a deep breath. Her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears in her eyes. Then, Mooing Gao raised her head and cast a sidelong glance at Mad Dragon with disdain. "Yes, my parents have already arranged a blind date for me. Don't come looking for me in the future. You are an assassin. Although you are powerful, an assassin like you can face death at any time. If you die, won't I become a widow? So I thought about it and decided that you shouldn't come looking for me in the future." As she spoke, Mooing glanced to the side. After she finished speaking, she added, "I was just playing with you before. Moreover, I needed someone to protect me. Did you really take it seriously?" After saying this, Mooing caught a glimpse of anger in Mad Dragon's eyes. And ruthlessness. Mooing wasn't the first to see Mad Dragon's expression, but when she saw Mad Dragon's expression, she still took a deep breath. Just as Mu Ying's eyes were rolling back and forth, Mad Dragon suddenly stared at her. The next second, his hand suddenly grabbed Mu Ying's neck and lifted Mooing off the ground. Then, with a bloodthirsty look, he said, "I won't allow betrayal. You are my woman, and you want to betray my feelings. Then I'll have to kill you and go to hell with you. Even if I die, I want to be with you. You can only have me in your life." Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 2543. Mad Dragon's words reeked of blood, and every time he opened his mouth, it was death. Mad Dragon was different from Snow Eagle, Adam, Emo's son, and Linwei. He was like Yun Jian and Shinji, someone who had been caught and sent to the Organization for Life and Death Training. Later on, when he became an assassin, he was instilled with the same philosophy. If you can't have it, then destroy it. Even if you destroy what's yours, you can't let anyone take it away. As for Mooing, Mad Dragon knew that she was very special. She was so special that he wanted to keep her in his arms and not let her leave his side. When they were dating, Mad Dragon would sneak to Mooing's balcony at night to watch her when it was quiet. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't want to scare Mooing, Mad Dragon would have kept Mooing within his reach and not let anyone touch her. Today, Mad Dragon didn't go on an assassination mission. When he asked to see Mu-Ying, he was rejected by Mu-Ying several times, so he lingered around Mu-Ying's house. When he saw the text message Mu-Ying sent him, Mad Dragon was on the verge of breaking down. Therefore, he didn't even think about it. He didn't even have the patience to open the floor-to-ceiling window. He used his brute body to directly rush in from the outside. After hearing Mu-Ying's words, Mad Dragon couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept that the woman he loved was with another man. If there was such a day, he would definitely kill her before it happened, and he would follow her to the afterlife. Cough, 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 cough. Mu-Ying's neck was choked by Mad Dragon. She coughed violently, her cheeks red. This scene reminded Mad Dragon of the ignorant little girl he had met in the Enhan organization. Mu-Ying was completely different from when she was in Enhan because Mu-Ying's body was already dead. But to Mad Dragon, no matter what Mu-Ying had become, he would still love her from the bottom of his heart. He still remembered that when he first joined Enhan, he was bullied by a group of boys who were considered strong among the children. At that time, Mad Dragon was covered in wounds, but he didn't utter a single word of pain. He had already given up on survival.
It was a rainy day.
In the cement field, he was beaten until his whole body was covered in wounds. He fell into the cement ditch and had already given up on living. Why are you lying here? You'll catch a cold. Get up. At that time, Mu-Ying was still young, but she was very sensible and obedient. When she saw Mad Dragon lying in the cement ditch, she rushed out to help Mad Dragon up. At that time, Mad Dragon was beaten up because the group of children wanted to steal his food and he refused. When Mu-Ying heard that he hadn't eaten for 3 days, she ran back to give him her dinner, a little bit of millet porridge. That was the first time Mad Dragon felt the warmth of another person. From then on, Mad Dragon swore that he would grow up and become strong enough to protect her. But Mu-Ying still died. From then on, Mad Dragon was completely useless and became a killing machine. He began to kill endlessly, until he met Mu-Ying again. It could be said that to Mad Dragon, Mu-Ying was his spiritual support. Without her, his existence had no meaning. So when he heard that Mu-Ying was going to leave him, Mad Dragon completely lost control. Mad Dragon only let go of Mu-Ying when she was about to pass out. He blinked his sharp eyes fiercely. In the next second, he threw Mu-Ying onto the bed and pressed himself on top of her. Since you've chosen to die, I'll let you experience what it's like to be a woman before you die. Calm. Wonderful Book House, you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.